Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we dive into the horror, I know many of you watch these stories to fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd like to ask for your support by subscribing to the channel. Your subscription is very important to us, so please subscribe to help us out. Also, it would be great if you could leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. We'd love to know where our stories are reaching. Hit the like button, get comfortable, and let's begin the hour of horror. The incessant patter of rain against my window had been my constant companion for hours. I sat at my desk, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen, willing the words to come. But my mind was as blank as the document before me. With a frustrated sigh, I pushed back from my desk and stood up, stretching my arms above my head. The clock on my nightstand read 11:43 p.m. Another late night with nothing to show for it. I padded over to the window, watching rivulets of water cascade down the glass. New York City sprawled out before me, a glittering tapestry of lights obscured by sheets of rain. Even at this hour, I could hear the muffled sounds of traffic below, horns honking, the occasional siren wailing in the distance. The city that never sleeps, they say. Unlike me, who couldn't seem to do anything but. As I was about to turn away, a movement caught my eye. Down on the sidewalk, barely visible in the glow of the street lamp, was a small, dark shape. I squinted, trying to make it out. It moved again, and my heart skipped a beat as I realized what it was. Akut, a scrawny, black cat, huddled against the building, seeking shelter from the downpour. "Oh, you poor thing," I murmured, my breath fogging the glass. I watched as the cat shook itself, sending droplets flying, before curling up tighter. Something tugged at my heart. I'd always been a sucker for animals, especially those in need, but I'd never had a pet of my own. My lifestyle, or lack thereof, didn't seem conducive to caring for another living being. "Don't even think about it, Sarah," I told myself sternly. "You can barely take care of yourself." I turned away from the window, determined to ignore the pitiful creature outside. I had work to do, deadlines to meet. I couldn't afford to be distracted by every stray that crossed my path. But as I sat back down at my desk, I found my gaze drawn back to the window. The cat was still there, a dark smudge against the wet concrete. As if sensing my attention, it looked up. Even from this distance, I could swear I saw its eyes gleaming. A plaintive meow reached my ears, muffled by the glass and the rain, but unmistakable. That sound wormed its way into my chest, wrapping around my heart and squeezing. "No," I said aloud, shaking my head. "No, below, below. You are not doing this, Sarah. You are not going to rescue a stray cat at midnight in the pouring rain." But even as the words left my mouth, I was already reaching for my raincoat. 5 minutes later, I found myself standing in the building's lobby, staring out at the rain-soaked street. The doorman, Joe, gave me a curious look. "Everything all right, Miss Walker?" he asked, his bushy eyebrows raised. I nodded, feeling slightly foolish. "Yes, I saw a can outside. I wanted to check on it." Joe's expression softened. "Ah, I see. Well, be careful out there. It's coming down something fierce." With a deep breath, I pushed open the door and stepped out into the deluge. The rain immediately plastered my hair to my face, and I blinked water out of my eyes as I scanned the sidewalk. For a moment, I thought the cat had gone. My heart sank with a mixture of relief and disappointment. But then I heard it, another meow, barely audible over the rain. I turned and saw the cat, still huddled against the building. As I approached, it looked up at me, its yellow eyes wary but not frightened. "Hey there," I said softly, crouching down. "You look like you could use a friend." The cat meowed again, a sound so pitiful it made my chest ache. I reached out slowly, letting it sniff my hand. After a moment's hesitation, it butted its head against my palm. "Oh, you're friendly, aren't you?" I murmured, gently scratching behind its ears. The cat leaned into my touch, purring softly. "And you're soaked to the bone, poor thing." Before I could second-guess myself, I scooped the cat into my arms. It was so light, barely more than skin and bones beneath its wet fur. The cat tensed for a moment, then relaxed against me, seeking warmth. "Okay," I said, more to myself than the cat. "Okay, we're doing this." I hurried back into the lobby, where Joe's eyes widened at the sight of me cradling the wet cat. "Sound a friend, did you?" he asked, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. I nodded, feeling rainwater drip down my neck. "Couldn't leave it out there. Do you think Mrs. Abernathy will mind?" Mrs. Abernathy was our building's notoriously strict manager. Joe winked at me. "What Mrs. Abernathy doesn't know won't hurt her. Your secret's safe with me, Miss Walker." "Thanks, Joe," I said gratefully, heading for the elevator. Back in my apartment, I set the cat down in my tiny bathroom and grabbed a towel. The cat allowed me to dry it off, purring loudly the entire time. "You're being very cooperative," I told it, rubbing its ears with the towel. "I hope you're not planning to tear up my furniture or anything." As the cat's fur dried, I could see just how skinny it really was. Its ribs were clearly visible, and its hip bones jutted out sharply. "You must be starving," I said. "Let's see what we can find for you to eat." In the kitchen, I rummaged through my cabinets. I didn't have any cat food, obviously, but I found a can of tuna that would have to do. As I opened the can, I heard the soft pat of paws behind me. The cat sat in the doorway watching me intently. In the bright light of my kitchen, I could see it clearly for the first time. It was entirely black, with no markings at all. Its yellow eyes seemed to glow as they fixed on the can in my hands. "Here you go," I said, putting the tuna in a small dish on the floor. "It's not gourmet, but it's better than nothing." The cat approached cautiously, sniffed the tuna, then began to eat with gusto. I watched it for a moment, a wave of contentment washing over me. There was something deeply satisfying about helping this creature, about knowing I'd made a difference, however small. While the cat ate, I changed out of my wet clothes and toweled off my hair. By the time I returned to the kitchen, the tuna was gone, and the cat was fastidiously cleaning its paws. "Feel better?" asked. The cat looked up at me and meowed softly. "Yeah, I bet you do. Come on, let's get comfortable." I settled onto my couch, and to my surprise, the cat immediately jumped up and curled into my lap. Its fur was soft now that it was dry, and its body was warm against my legs. The purring resumed, a soothing vibration that seemed to resonate through my entire body. As I stroked the cat's back, I found myself talking to it. "You know, I've never had a pet before. My mom was allergic to pretty much everything with fur, and then I was always too busy with school and work. But this is nice, really nice." The cat's purring intensified, as if in agreement. I smiled, feeling more relaxed than I had in months. Maybe this was exactly what I needed, a little companionship to break up the monotony of my solitary life. "I suppose I should give you a name," I mused. "How about Midnight? No, too cliché for a black cat. Shadow? Luna?" The cat's ear twitched at that last one. "Luna? You like that?" As if in response, the cat, Luna, stretched languidly in my lap before settling back down. I chuckled. "Luna it is, then." I don't know how long I sat there, stroking Luna's fur and enjoying the peaceful moment, but eventually my eyelids began to grow heavy. I carefully lifted Luna off my lap and stood up, stretching. "All right, Luna, time for bed. You can sleep on the couch if you like. We'll figure out more permanent arrangements tomorrow." I headed to my bedroom, leaving the door cracked open in case Luna needed anything during the night. As I slipped under the covers, I felt a contentment I hadn't experienced in a long time. Maybe taking in a stray cat in the middle of the night wasn't such a crazy idea after all. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard it, a gravelly voice, low and distinct, coming from somewhere in my apartment. "Thank you, Sarah." My eyes flew open, heart suddenly pounding. I sat up, straining my ears in the darkness. Had I imagined it? Was I more tired than I thought? Then I heard it again, closer this time. "Sarah." I fumbled for the lamp on my nightstand, my fingers shaking as I clicked it on. Light flooded the room, and I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust my vision. There, sitting at the foot of my bed, was Luna. The cat's yellow eyes were fixed on me, unblinking and somehow different than before. They seemed deeper, older, filled with an intelligence that sent a chill down my spine. "Luna," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. The cat's mouth opened, and impossibly, incredibly, that gravelly voice emerged once more. "Tomorrow the bridge will fall." My world tilted on its axis as Luna's eyes locked onto mine, conveying a message that went beyond words. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that my life would never be the same again. The stray cat I had rescued wasn't just a cat, and whatever it was, it had something to tell me, something I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying the impossible scene over and over. Luna's glowing eyes, that gravelly voice emerging from a feline mouth, the chilling words, "Tomorrow, the bridge will fall." As the first rays of dawn filtered through my curtains, I gave up on sleep entirely. I stumbled out of bed, my body heavy with exhaustion, and made my way to the kitchen. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. "Luna," I called out, my voice hoarse. No response. I searched every room, growing increasingly frantic. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was I going crazy? But as I returned to the living room, I spotted a tuft of black fur on the couch, proof that last night wasn't entirely a hallucination. With shaking hands, I made myself a cup of coffee, the strongest I could manage. As the bitter liquid hit my system, I felt my nerves begin to settle. Rationality started to seep back in. "Okay, Sarah," I muttered to myself. "Let's think this through logically. Cats don't talk. You were tired, stressed, and your imagination got the better of you. That's all." But even as I said the words, I knew I didn't believe them. The memory was too vivid, too real. I grabbed my laptop and settled on the couch, determined to distract myself with work. But as I opened my email, a news alert popped up on my screen. My blood ran cold as I read the headline. "Breaking: Structural concerns force closure of Brooklyn Bridge." My coffee mug slipped from my nerveless fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. I barely noticed the hot liquid seeping into my socks as I clicked on the article, my heart pounding in my ears. The report detailed how routine maintenance had uncovered severe structural weaknesses in the bridge's cables. As a precautionary measure, the bridge had been closed to all traffic until further notice. Engineers were quoted as saying it was a miracle the issues were caught before a catastrophic failure occurred. A miracle, or a prophecy. "This can't be happening," I whispered, staring at the screen in disbelief. "But it is," came that now familiar gravelly voice from behind me. I whirled around to see Luna perched on the back of the couch, yellow eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. "You?" I breathed. "It wasn't a dream. You can really talk." Luna's tail swished lazily. "Indeed. And as you can see, I speak the truth." I shook my head, trying to clear it. This was insane. I was having a conversation with a cat about predicting the future. I must be losing my mind. "Cool, what are you?" I managed to ask. Luna stretched languidly before responding. "I am many things, Sarah. A messenger, a warning, a catalyst. But right now I am simply a cat who is quite hungry." Perhaps we could continue this conversation over breakfast. The sheer absurdity of the situation startled a laugh out of me. Here I was, faced with an impossible talking cat that could apparently see the future, and it was asking for breakfast. Right? I said, running a hand through my tangled hair. Breakfast. I can do that. As I busied myself in the kitchen, opening another can of tuna for Luna and making toast for myself, my mind raced. Questions bubbled up faster than I could process them. But one rose to the forefront, demanding to be asked. Why me? I said as I set the dish of tuna on the floor. Of all the people in New York, why did you choose to come to me? Luna paused in her eating to look up at me. You chose me, Sarah. You opened your door and your heart. That is significant. I sank into a chair, my toast forgotten. But what does it mean? Why are you telling me these things? That prediction about the bridge. Was it a warning? Could I have stopped it? No, Luna said, her voice taking on a somber tone. What I see will come to pass. It cannot be changed. A chill ran down my spine. Then why tell me at all? Luna finished her tuna and began grooming herself before answering. Knowledge is power, Sarah. Even if you cannot change events, being prepared for them can make all the difference. I mulled this over, trying to wrap my head around the implications. So you're gonna keep predicting things? And I'm supposed to what? Just sit back and watch them happen? For now, yes, Luna said. Watch. Understand. Your role will become clear in time. I opened my mouth to ask more questions, but Luna suddenly tensed, her ears flattening against her head. Her eyes seemed to glaze over, staring at something I couldn't see. Luna, I said, worry creeping into my voice. What's wrong? When she spoke again, her voice was different, deeper, more resonant, filled with an otherworldly power that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Fire consumes, metal twists, lives hang in the balance. The tower of glass will become a furnace. As suddenly as it had come, the moment passed. Luna shook herself, then looked at me with what I could have sworn was concern. What was that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Another prophecy, Luna said simply. One that will come to pass very soon. My mind raced, trying to decipher the cryptic words. A fire? In a glass building? Where? When? But Luna just shook her head. I've told you all I can. The rest is up to you. Frustration welled up inside me. What am I supposed to do with this information? I can't just call the fire department and tell them a talking cat predicted a fire in some unspecified glass building. No, Luna agreed. But you can be vigilant. You can be prepared. And when the time comes, you may find yourself in a position to help. I stood up abruptly, pacing the small confines of my kitchen. This was too much, too bizarre, too terrifying. Part of me wanted to run, to get as far away from this strange cat and its dire predictions as possible. But another part, a part one, was only just becoming aware of, felt a sense of purpose, of responsibility. Okay, I said finally, taking a deep breath. Okay, I don't understand any of this, but I'll try. Watch. I'll be prepared. Luna nodded, a gesture so human it was unsettling. Good. That's all I ask for now. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to work, but my concentration was shot. And padded over to me, leaping up onto the couch with feline grace. What did you have in mind? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I want you to tell me everything you see, every prediction, no matter how small. I'm going to record it all, try to piece it together. Luna's yellow eyes seemed to glow as she regarded me. Are you certain you want to bear that burden, Sarah? Knowledge of the future is not always a gift. I'm already bearing it, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. At least this way, maybe some good can come of it. Luna was quiet for a long moment, her gaze never leaving mine. Finally, she nodded. Very well. But remember, the future is not always clear, even to me. What I see may be fragmented, symbolic. I understand, I said, my fingers poised over the keyboard. I'm ready. What followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Luna's eyes glazed over, taking on that otherworldly look I'd seen before. When she spoke, her voice resonated with power, each word seeming to vibrate in the air. Water rises, concrete crumbles. The tunnels beneath the city will become rivers. The iron horses will drown in the deluge. I typed frantically, trying to capture every word. A flood? I asked, my mind racing. In the subway system? But Luna wasn't finished. Her voice grew louder, more urgent. The sky turns black at midday. Wings of steel fall from the heavens. The city holds its breath as death rains down. My hands shook as I transcribed the chilling words. Oh God, I whispered. That sounds like a plane crash. Luna's eyes cleared, and she shook herself as if coming out of a trance. That is all I can see for now, she said, her voice back to its normal gravelly tone. I stared at the screen, reading over what I'd written. The predictions were terrifying in their implications. A flood in the subway system could paralyze the city, trapping countless people underground. And a plane crash. The potential for devastation was unthinkable. When? I asked, turning to Luna. When will these things happen? Luna's ears twitched. Time is fluid in these visions. But soon. The flood will come first, I believe. Determination surged through me. This time, I wouldn't just sit by and watch. I would act. Okay, I said, standing up. We need to warn someone. The transit authority, the mayor's office. Someone who can actually do something about this. Luna's tail swished skeptically. And how do you propose to do that without sounding like a lunatic? I paused, considering. She had a point. I couldn't exactly walk into City Hall and announce that my talking cat had predicted a disaster. But there had to be a way. What if I presented it as a hypothetical scenario and used aloud? Then, what if proposal for emergency preparedness? Luna tilted her head, considering. It could work, but be careful, Sarah. Drawing too much attention to yourself could be dangerous. I nodded, already formulating a plan. I spent the next few hours drafting a detailed report, carefully framing Luna's predictions as potential scenarios that the city should be prepared for. I included statistics on past flooding incidents, weather patterns, and the potential impact on the city's infrastructure. By the time I finished, it was well past midnight. I sent the report to every relevant email address I could find: the MTA, the Office of Emergency Management, the mayor's office, even local news stations. There, I said, hitting send on the last email. It's done. Now we wait. Luna, who had been dozing on the windowsill, opened one eye. And what will you do if they ignore your warnings? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. What if they did ignore me? What if I had this knowledge and still couldn't prevent the disaster? Then I'll find another way, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I'll keep trying until someone listens. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I checked my email obsessively, hoping for some response, some indication that my warnings had been taken seriously. But as the hours tipped by with no reply, desperation began to set in. They're not listening, I said to Luna on the third day, pacing my small living room. No one's even acknowledged receiving the report. Luna watched me from her perch on the bookshelf. Perhaps it's time for more direct action. I stopped pacing, turning to look at her. What do you mean? If the authorities won't listen, perhaps the people will, Luna said, her yellow eyes gleaming. The power of information in the digital age is immense. Use it. The idea hit me like a bolt of lightning. The course, social media. If I could get the warning to go viral, the authorities would have to take notice. I spent the next hour crafting a series of posts, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit. I was careful not to mention Luna or my true source of information, instead framing it as a concerned citizen's warning based on inside information. I included enough details from my report to sound credible, but kept it vague enough to avoid panic. As I hovered over the post button, a flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Was I doing the right thing? What if I was wrong, and this caused unnecessary fear? Trust your instincts, Sarah, Luna said softly, as if reading my thoughts. You bear this knowledge for a reason. Taking a deep breath, I clicked post. The response was almost immediate. Within hours, my posts had been shared thousands of times. People were speculating, arguing, some dismissing it as a hoax while others called for immediate action. Local news stations picked up the story, running segments on the mysterious online warning. By nightfall, my phone was ringing off the hook. Journalists, city officials, even a few conspiracy theorists, all wanting to know more about my inside information. It's working, I said to Luna, a mix of excitement and terror coursing through me. They're finally paying attention. Luna's expression was unreadable. Be careful, Sarah. Attention can be a double-edged sword. As if on cue, there was a sharp knock at my door. I froze, my heart pounding. Luna disappeared into the bedroom as I cautiously approached the door. Through the peephole, I saw two men in suits, their expressions grim. One held up a badge. Ms. Walker? A deep voice called out. This is the FBI. We need to talk about your recent online activities. My blood ran cold. This was it. The moment of truth. As I reached for the door handle, Luna's words echoed in my mind. Trust your instincts. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door, ready to face whatever came next. One thing was certain. There was no turning back now. The desperate measures I had taken had set events in motion, and I could only hope that in the end, it would all be worth it. As the agents stepped into my apartment, I steeled myself for what was to come. The fate of countless lives might depend on what I said next. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders like a physical thing. But beneath the fear and uncertainty, a small spark of hope flickered to life. For the first time since Luna had entered my life, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. Whatever the cost, whatever the consequences, I was determined to see this through. The future may be set, but how we face it, that was up to me. The interrogation lasted for hours. The FBI Agents Reeves and Donovan, grilled me relentlessly about my inside information. I stuck to my story, anonymous tips, intuition, lucky guesses. But I could see the skepticism in their eyes. They knew I was hiding something. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through my apartment windows, Agent Reeves finally leaned back with a sigh. Ms. Walker, I hope you understand the seriousness of this situation, he said, his voice gravelly from the long night. Inciting public panic is a federal offense. I met his gaze steadily, summoning every ounce of conviction I possessed. I understand, Agent Reeves, but I also understand the seriousness of ignoring potential threats to public safety. I did what I thought was right. Agent Donovan, the younger of the two, exchanged a glance with his partner. Be that as it may, we'll need you to come down to the field office for further questioning. My heart sank. I opened my mouth to protest, but a sudden movement caught my eye. Luna had emerged from her hiding place, padding silently across the room. As she passed behind the agents, unseen, her eyes locked with mine. In that moment, I heard her voice in my mind, clear as day. Hold firm, Sarah. Your sister needs you. A chill ran down my spine. Luna hadn't spoken of my sister before. What did she mean? Ms. Walker, Agent Reeves' voice snapped me back to the present. Did you hear what we said? I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I'm sorry, agents, but I can't come with you right now. My sister, I have a feeling she's in trouble. I need to check on her. The agents exchanged another look, this one tinged with exasperation. Ms. Walker, I'm afraid that's not an option. Agent Donovan began, but I cut him off. Please, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. Just let me make one phone call. If everything's fine, I'll go with you without another word of protest. After a moment of tense silence, Agent Reeves nodded. One call. Make it quick. With shaking hands, I dialed my sister Emily's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. My heart pounded in my ears. On the 5th ring, she picked up. Sarah, Emily's voice was groggy with sleep. Do you have any idea what time it is? Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a wave of dread. Luna's warning echoed in my mind. I'm sorry to wake you. Are you okay? Is everything all right? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired. I have a big meeting today, remember? The Carter account. The course. Emily had been working on this presentation for weeks. It was a make-or-break moment for her career. Right, of course, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Listen to me. I need you to do something for me. It's going to sound crazy, but please, just trust me. Sarah, what's going on? You're scaring me. I took a deep breath, acutely aware of the FBI agents watching me closely. I need you to call in sick today. Don't go to that meeting. Don't even leave your apartment. Please, It's important. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity. When Emily finally spoke, her voice was tight with anger and confusion. Have you lost your mind? This meeting is everything I've been working towards. I can't just not show up. Emily, please, I begged, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I can't explain right now, but I swear to you this is life or death important. Please, just trust me. Another long pause. Then, fine. But you owe me one hell of an explanation, Sarah. And if I lose this account because of you, I know, I said, relief flooding through me. I'll explain everything later. Promise. Just stay safe. Okay? As I hung up the phone, I turned to face the FBI agents. Their expressions were a mix of suspicion and concern. Satisfied, Agent Reeves asked, his tone clipped. I nodded, suddenly feeling drained. Yes, thank you. I'm ready to go with you now. The next few hours passed in a blur of sterile interrogation rooms and repetitive questions. I stuck to my story, revealing nothing about Luna or the true source of my predictions. By mid-afternoon, even the persistent agents seemed to be running out of steam. As Agent Donovan was in the middle of yet another round of questions, the door to the interrogation room burst open. A junior agent rushed in, his face pale. Sirs, you need to see this, he said, handing a tablet to Agent Reeves. I watched as the color drained from Reeves' face. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. There's been an accident, he said slowly. A car crash, on the route your sister would have taken to her meeting. My blood ran cold. Is she? Your sister wasn't involved, Reeves continued, his voice tight. But if she had been on that road, he didn't need to finish the sentence. I closed my eyes, relief and horror warring within me. Emily was safe, thanks to my warning. But someone else, someone who didn't have a prophetic cat looking out for them, hadn't been so lucky. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. The agent's skepticism had given way to a wary sort of belief. They released me later that evening, with strict instructions not to leave town and to remain available for further questioning. As I stumbled back into my apartment, exhausted and emotionally drained, I found Luna waiting for me on the kitchen counter. "You did well, Sarah," she said, her yellow eyes gleaming in the dim light. I sank into a chair, burying my face in my hands. "Did I? Someone died today, Luna. Someone who might have lived if I'd warned them instead of Emily." Luna's voice was gentle but firm. "You cannot save everyone, Sarah. The future unfolds as it must. Your role is to navigate it, not to change it." I looked up at her, frustration bubbling up inside me. "Then what's the point? Why give me these warnings if I can't really change anything?" "Because knowledge is power," Luna replied, echoing her words from days ago. "And how you use that power matters. You saved your sister today. That is not nothing." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "We need to talk. Now." I sighed, running a hand through my tangled hair. "I guess it's time to face the music." Luna tilted her head. "Will you tell her the truth?" I paused, considering. The thought of revealing Luna's existence, of trying to explain the impossible situation I found myself in, made my head spin. But I was tired of lies, tired of bearing this burden alone. "Yes," I said finally. "I think it's time for the truth. All of it." Luna nodded, a look of approval in her eyes. "Good. You will need allies in the days to come, Sarah. The personal touch, the connections you forge, the trust you build, these will be your strength." As I dialed Emily's number, I felt a strange mix of trepidation and relief. Whatever came next, at least I wouldn't be facing it alone anymore. "Thing," I said when she picked up. "There's something I need to tell you. It's gonna sound crazy, but I need you to listen with an open mind." It all started a few nights ago when I took in a stray cat. As I launched into my incredible tale, I could almost feel the fabric of my reality shifting once again. The personal had become inextricably entwined with the prophetic, and there was no going back. The future, whatever it held, was rushing towards us, and I was determined to face it head-on, with both the otherworldly wisdom of Luna and the grounding force of human connection by my side. In that moment, as I bared my soul to my sister, I realized that this was just the beginning. The real challenge, balancing the weight of foreknowledge with the unpredictability of human emotion and choice, was only just beginning. But for the first time since Luna had entered my life, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever trials lay ahead, I would face them not just as a reluctant prophet, but as a sister, a friend, a human being trying to make sense of an impossible situation. And somehow that made all the difference. The days following my confession to Emily blurred together in a haze of disbelief, frantic research, and hushed conversations. To her credit, my sister took the news about Luna better than I could have hoped. After the initial shock wore off, her analytical mind kicked into high gear. "So, let me get this straight," Emily said, pacing my living room while Luna watched from her perch on the bookshelf. "Your cat can predict the future, but only in cryptic, ominous phrases." I nodded, sipping my third cup of coffee of the day. "That's the gist of it, yeah." Emily ran a hand through her hair, a gesture we both shared when stressed. "And you've been trying to warn people, but no one believes you?" "Well, they're starting to," I said, gesturing to the muted TV where a news anchor was discussing the recent, anonymous tips that had predicted several incidents around the city. "But it's not enough. We're always a step behind, always reacting instead of preventing." Luna's gravelly voice cut through our conversation. "Prevention is not always possible or wise. The future unfolds as it must." Emily jumped slightly, still not used to hearing the cat speak. "Right, because that's not creepy at all," she muttered. I shot Luna a warning look before turning back to my sister. I know it's a lot to take in, but I need your help. I can't do this alone anymore." Emily's expression softened. She came over and sat next to me on the couch, taking my hand. "Of course I'll help, Sarah. You're my sister. We're in this together now, whatever this is." Relief washed over me, and I squeezed her hand gratefully. But before I could respond, Luna's ears suddenly flattened against her head, her yellow eyes glazing over in that now familiar way. "It's happening again," I whispered to Emily, who watched with wide-eyed fascination as Luna began to speak in that otherworldly voice. "Shadows lengthen, creeping across the city's heart. The Tower of Light will become a beacon of darkness. Those who seek truth will be blinded." As Luna's eyes cleared, I frantically scribbled down her words. Emily leaned over my shoulder, her brow furrowed. "What does that mean? Tower of Light? Beacon of darkness?" I shook my head, frustration building. "I don't know. It's always like this, a vague, symbolic. We have to figure out what it means before it's too late." Emily stood up, determination etched on her face. "Okay, let's break this down. Tower of Light. What in the city could that refer to?" We spent the next few hours brainstorming, researching, and arguing. As night fell, we had a wall covered in sticky notes, string connecting various theories and potential targets. "The Empire State Building?" Emily suggested, pointing to a note. "It's literally called the Empire State of Light sometimes." I shook my head. "Maybe, but it doesn't feel right. The prophecy mentioned truth. What if it's not a literal tower?" A chill ran down my spine as a thought occurred to me. What if it's talking about the New York Times building?" Emily's eyes widened. "The newspaper? That actually makes sense. All the news that's fit to print. They're supposed to be a beacon of truth. And if something happens there, something that blinds people to the truth." I trailed off, the implications sinking in. Luna, who had been silent during our discussion, suddenly spoke up. "You're on the right track, Sarah. But remember, not all darkness is evil, and not all light is good." I turned to the cat, frustration bubbling up. "Can't you just tell us exactly what's going to happen? Why all the riddles?" Luna's tail swished slowly. "The future is not a fixed point, Sarah. There's a tapestry of possibilities, constantly shifting. I see patterns, threads of probability, but the final picture is always in flux." Emily snorted. "Well, that's helpfully vague." I was about to agree when my phone buzzed. It was a news alert. My blood ran cold as I read the headline aloud. "Breaking. New York Times announces major expose. Promises to shine light on city's darkest secrets." Emily and I exchanged a look of dawning horror. "It's happening," I whispered. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. We tried everything we could think of to warn the New York Times, from anonymous tips to attempting to schedule interviews under false pretenses. That our efforts were met with skepticism at best and outright dismissal at worst. As the day of the promised expose drew nearer, a sense of foreboding settled over us like a heavy blanket. Luna's predictions grew more frequent and more ominous, each one adding to the growing tapestry of dread we were weaving. "I don't understand," I said one evening, slumped over my laptop. "If this expose is going to be so damaging, why can't we just let it happen? Isn't exposing corruption a good thing?" Luna, who had been dozing on the windowsill, opened one eye. "Not all truths are meant to be known, Sarah. Some secrets protect more than they harm." Emily, who had practically moved in at this point, looked up from her own research. "But who gets to decide that? Who are we to play judge and jury with information?" "That," Luna said, her voice heavy with something that sounded almost like sorrow, "is the burden you must bear. The power to know the future comes with the responsibility to shape it, for better or worse." As if to punctuate Luna's words, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. "I know what you know. Meet me at the Bethesda Fountain in Central Park. Midnight. Come alone." I showed the message to Emily, whose face paled. "Sarah, you can't seriously be thinking of going. It's obviously a trap." But even as she said it, I could feel a pull and certainty that this was important. I turned to Luna, who met my gaze steadily. "You must go," she said simply, "but be cautious. The shadows are deepening, and not all allies are what they seem." Emily threw up her hands in exasperation. "This is insane. If you're going, I'm coming with you." I shook my head. "No, Eminencia, I need you here safe. If something happens to me, someone needs to know the truth. To carry on." The look on my sister's face nearly broke my heart, but she nodded reluctantly. "Fina, but you're wearing a wire, and I'm calling the cops if I don't hear from you by 12:30. As midnight approached, I found myself standing by the Bethesda fountain, the angel's statue looming above me in the darkness. The park was eerily quiet, the usual city sounds muffled by distance and the late hour. "Sarah Walker," a voice said from behind me. I whirled around to see a figure emerging from the shadows. As they stepped into the dim light, I gasped. It was Agent Reeves from the FBI. "You," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You sent the message?" Reeves nodded grimly. "We've been watching you, Ms. Walker. Your predictions, your warnings, they haven't gone unnoticed." My heart pounded in my chest. "Then you believe me? About the New York Times? About the danger?" "We believe that you believe it," Reeves said carefully. "But we need to know more. Your source, your methods. We can't act on vague warnings and hunches." I took a deep breath, weighing my options. Luna's words echoed in my mind. Not all allies are what they seem. But as I looked at Reeves, I saw something in his eyes, a desperation, a need to understand that mirrored my own. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll tell you everything, but not here. We need to go somewhere safe, somewhere we can talk freely." Reeves nodded, relief evident on his face. "I know just the place. Follow me." As we walked away from the fountain, the angel's shadow seemed to stretch behind us, growing longer and darker with each step. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something bigger and more dangerous than I could possibly imagine. But I also felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, with the FBI's help, we could finally get ahead of these prophecies. Maybe we could start shaping the future instead of just reacting to it. As we reached Reeves' car, I cast one last look back at the park. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw a pair of glowing yellow eyes watching us from the darkness. Then they were gone, and I was left with nothing but the growing certainty that everything was about to change. The darkness was growing, yes, but so was our determination to face it head-on. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in Queens, its windows covered with heavy curtains that blocked out the first rays of dawn. I sat on a worn couch, a cup of lukewarm coffee clutched in my trembling hands, as Agent Reeves paced the small living room. "Let me get this straight," he said, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Your source is a cat? A talking cat that can see the future?" I nodded, too exhausted to feel embarrassed anymore. "I know how it sounds, believe me, but it's the truth." Reeves stopped pacing and fixed me with a penetrating stare. "Ms. Walker, I've seen a lot of strange things in my career, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. Tell me about it," I muttered, taking a sip of coffee. "And this cat Luna, she's been predicting disasters, accidents, things like the bridge incident and your sister's near-miss." I nodded again. "And more. But it's not always clear what the predictions mean until it's too late." Reeves sank into an armchair across from me, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "If what you're saying is true, this changes everything. The implications for national security alone." A chill ran down my spine. "Is that why you brought me here? To use Luna as some kind of weapon?" Reeves held up his hands placatingly. Lo, Dino. At least not exactly. We want to help Ms. Walker, but we need to understand what we're dealing with. I set down my coffee cup, leaning forward. What about the New York Times? The expose? We're running out of time. Reeves' expression darkened. We've been monitoring the situation. Whatever they're planning to publish, it's big, potentially destabilizing. But isn't that a good thing? I asked, confusion creeping into my voice. Exposing corruption, shining a light on the truth? Reeves shook his head slowly. Not all truths are meant to be known, Ms. Walker. Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. A chill ran down my spine as I recognized Luna's words echoed by the FBI agent. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. Where are you? Are you okay? Call me ASAP. Guilt washed over me as I realized I'd forgotten to check in with my sister. I need to call my sister, I told Reeves. She's worried. He nodded, standing up. Go ahead. I need to make some calls of my own. We're going to need backup for what comes next. As Reeves stepped out of the room, I dialed Emily's number. She picked up on the first ring. Sarah? Oh, thank God. Where are you? What happened? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Imokai, I'm with the SBI. Is a long story. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, the FBI? Sarah, what the hell is going on? I glanced towards the door where Reeves had disappeared. I'm not entirely sure, but I think we might finally have some help. As I filled Emily in on the night's events, I could hear the mixture of relief and skepticism in her voice. Just be careful, Sarah, she said finally. We still don't know who we can trust. I know, I replied, a lump forming in my throat. Ain, leasing. If anything happens to me, don't. Emily cut me off sharply. Don't you dare start with goodbyes. You're coming home, Sarah. We're in this together, remember? I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Right, together. I'll call you again as soon as I can. As I hung up, I became aware of a presence in the room. I turned to see Luna perched on the windowsill, her yellow eyes gleaming in the dim light. Luna! I gasped. How did you get here? The cat's tail swished slowly. I go where I am needed, Sarah. And right now, you need me more than ever. Before I could respond, Reeves re-entered the room. He stopped short at the sight of Luna, his hand instinctively moving towards his holstered gun. Is that? He trailed off, eyes wide. I stood up, moving between Reeves and Luna. Yes, this is Luna, the cat I told you about. Reeves' hand dropped away from his gun, but his posture remained tense. Dick, soon, can really talk? Luna's gravelly voice filled the room. Indeed I can, Agent Reeves, and I have much to tell you both. What followed was the most surreal briefing in FBI history. Luna laid out a series of predictions, each more dire than the last. The New York Times expose was just the beginning, she explained. It would set off a chain reaction of events that could tear the city, and possibly the country, apart. But why? I asked, frustration coloring my voice. Why can't we just let the truth come out? Luna's eyes seemed to bore into my soul. Because, Sarah, the truth in question is not just about corruption or scandal. It's about something far older and more dangerous. Something that has been hiding in the shadows of the city since its founding. Reeves leaned forward, his professional skepticism warring with growing belief. What are you talking about? What's been hiding? Luna's voice took on an otherworldly quality that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. There are forces in this world beyond human understanding. Ancient entities that feed on fear, chaos, and suffering. One such entity has embedded itself deep within the power structures of New York. The expose threatens to reveal its existence. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications of Luna's words sank in. Reeves was the first to break it. So what you're saying is, we're not just dealing with corruption or crime. We're talking about some kind of supernatural threat. Luna nadit salimli. Precisely. And if its existence is revealed too soon, before you are prepared to face it, the consequences will be catastrophic. I felt like the room was spinning. So what do we do? How do we stop the exposé without becoming the bad guys ourselves? Luna's gaze shifted to me. That, Sarah, is where you come in. Your role is not just to warn, but to guide. To help shape the future in a way that minimizes harm and maximizes hope. Reeves stood up abruptly, pacing again. This is insane. We can't just. There are protocols, procedures. I watched him, a strange calm settling over me. Agent Reeves, I said softly. I know this is hard to believe. Believe me, I've been struggling with it for weeks. But if Luna is right, and so far she always has been, we don't have the luxury of disbelief anymore. We have to act. Reeves stopped pacing, looking from me to Luna and back again. Finally, his shoulders sagged in resignation. Alright, what's our next move? Luna's eyes gleamed with approval. First, we need to secure the New York Times building. Not to stop the truth, but to control how it's revealed. The entity will try to use the chaos of the revelation to strengthen its hold. We must be ready. As Reeves began making calls, coordinating with his superiors and setting up a task force, I felt a shift in the air. The battle lines were being drawn. The future Luna had foreseen was rushing towards us. But for the first time, I felt like we had a chance to shape it. I turned to Luna, a question burning in my mind. Why me? Of all the people in New York, why did you choose me for this? Luna's expression was inscrutable. You chose yourself, Sarah. When you opened your door and your heart to a stray cat on a rainy night, compassion, courage, and the willingness to believe in the impossible. These are the qualities needed to face what's coming. As the sun rose over the city, casting long shadows through the gaps in the curtains, I steeled myself for what was to come. The battle was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined. But I wasn't alone anymore. With Luna's guidance, Emily's support, and now the resources of the FBI, we had a fighting chance. Whatever this entity was, whatever darkness it had planned for the city, we would face it head-on. The future was not set in stone, and I was done being a passive observer. It was time to take an active role in shaping the destiny of New York, and perhaps the world. As Reeves finished his calls and turned to us with a determined expression, I knew that everything was about to change. The battle for the soul of the city was about to begin, and we were on the front lines. All right, Reeves said, his voice filled with a mix of trepidation and resolve. Let's go save New York. The New York Times building loomed before us, its glass facade reflecting the early morning sun. I stood on the sidewalk across the street, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched FBI agents and NYPD officers swarming around the entrance. Are you sure about this? Emily asked, her voice tight with worry. She had insisted on joining us, despite my protests. I nodded, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. We don't have a choice. If we don't act now, everything Luna predicted will come to pass. Agent Reeves approached us, his face grim. We're ready. Remember the plan. We go in, secure the servers, and contain the situation. No one publishes anything until we've had a chance to review it. And if they resist? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Reeves' expression hardened. Then we do what we have to do. The safety of the city comes first. As we crossed the street, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into the lion's den. Luna's words echoed in my mind. The Tower of Light will become a beacon of darkness. Those who seek truth will be blinded. The lobby was chaos, Journalists and staff members were arguing with the officers, demanding to know what was happening. I saw fear, anger, and confusion on their faces. These were people dedicated to uncovering the truth, and here we were trying to suppress it. SBI, everyone remain calm, Reeves shouted, his voice cutting through the din. This is a matter of national security. We need everyone to cooperate. A tall woman with steely gray hair pushed her way to the front of the crowd. I'm Catherine Branson, Editor-in-Chief. What is the meaning of this? You can't just barge in here and dash, Ms. Branson, Reeves interrupted. I have a federal warrant authorizing us to seize all materials related to your upcoming expose. I need you to take us to your servers. Now, Branson's face paled, but her voice remained steady. This is a violation of the First Amendment. We will not stand for this kind of government overreach. I stepped forward, my heart racing. Ms. Branson, please. I know how this looks, but you have to trust us. The story you're about to publish, it's more dangerous than you can imagine. Branson's eyes narrowed as she looked at me. And who are you? Someone who knows what's really going on, I said, meeting her gaze. Someone who's trying to prevent a catastrophe. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, but then her expression hardened. Young lady, I've been a journalist for 40 years. I faced down threats, lawsuits, and worse. Whatever you think you know, it doesn't change our duty to inform the public. Before I could respond, a commotion broke out near the elevators. A young man was trying to push past the officers, a laptop clutched to his chest. Stop him, Reeves shouted. He's trying to upload the story. Everything happened in a blur. Officers tackled the man, the laptop skidding across the floor. Emily lunged for it, snatching it up before anyone else could reach it. And then suddenly the lights went out. Darkness engulfed us, broken only by the eerie glow of emergency exit signs. Panic rippled through the crowd. And in that moment of chaos, I heard it, a low, rumbling laugh that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Luna was right, I whispered, a chill running down my spine. It's here. As if in response, the darkness seemed to deepen, taking on an almost tangible quality. I felt something brush past me, cold and ancient and utterly alien. Sarah, Emily's voice cut through the darkness. The laptop, it's doing something weird. I fumbled my way towards her voice, nearly tripping over panicked people trying to find their way out. When I reached Emily, I saw what she meant. The laptop screen was glowing with an unnatural light, lines of code scrolling faster than the eye could follow. It's uploading, I realized with horror. The entity. It's using the chaos to release the story. Reeves appeared beside us, his face illuminated by the laptop's glow. We need to stop it. Now. How? Emily asked, her fingers hovering uncertainly over the keyboard. I closed my eyes, trying to think. Luna had said I had a role to play, that I could help shape the future. But how? And then it hit me. We don't stop it, I said, my eyes snapping open. We change it. Without waiting for a response, I grabbed the laptop from Emily and began to type furiously. I didn't know where the words were coming from, but they flowed through me like a river. I wrote of ancient forces and hidden truths, of the thin line between knowledge and chaos. But most of all, I wrote of hope, of the power of human resilience and the strength found in unity. As I typed the final words, I felt something shift in the air around us. The oppressive darkness began to recede, replaced by a soft, warm light that seemed to emanate from the laptop itself. Slowly, the building's power flickered back to life. As light flooded the lobby, I saw faces turn towards us, no longer panicked, but filled with a mixture of awe and determination. Branson pushed her way through the crowd, her eyes fixed on the laptop screen. What is this? The truth, I said simply. Or at least, A version of it that won't tear the city apart. As the modified story began to spread across social media and news outlets, I felt a presence beside me. Luna had appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. "Well done, Sarah," she said, her gravelly voice filled with approval. "You have taken the first step in reshaping the future." Reeves stared at Luna, then at me, his expression a mix of disbelief and grudging respect. "I don't know how you did that." "Fine. Thank you. Both of you." Emily wrapped an arm around my shoulders, squeezing tight. "That's my sister, saving the world, one rewrite at a time." But even as a sense of victory washed over us, I knew this was just the beginning. The entity had been thwarted for now, but it was still out there, still a threat. "What happens next?" I asked Luna, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. Luna's yellow eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. "Now, Sarah, the real work begins. The entity will not take this defeat lightly. They will strike back, and we must be ready." Ranson, who had been reading the modified story on a nearby computer, turned to us with a look of fierce determination. "Whatever this is, whatever we're up against, the people have a right to know, and we'll make sure they do the right way this time." I nodded, feeling a surge of hope. We had allies now, not just Emily and Reeves, but the power of the press as well. Maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. As we left the New York Times building, the city seemed different somehow. There was an energy in the air, a sense of awakening. People were reading the story on their phones, talking animatedly to each other. The truth was out there now, in a form they could handle, and it was bringing people together instead of tearing them apart. "You've given them hope," Luna said, padding along beside me. "But remember, hope is a double-edged sword. It can inspire great courage, but it can also blind people to the dangers that still lurk in the shadows." I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "So what's our next move?" Reeves, who had been on the phone with his superiors, rejoined. "We've been given full authority to investigate this entity. Whatever it is, wherever it's hiding, we're going to find it and stop it." Emily grinned, a hint of her old enthusiasm breaking through the tension. "Ghostbusters FBI edition. I like it." But as we walked down the busy New York street, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. In the reflections of shop windows, in the shadows of alleyways, I caught glimpses of something dark and formless, always just at the edge of perception. The battle for New York's soul was far from over. The entity had been pushed back, but not defeated. And as Luna had warned, he would not take this setback lightly. As if reading my thoughts, Luna spoke, her voice low and urgent. "Be ready, Sarah. The entity will strike again, and soon. And next time, it won't be content with merely spreading chaos. It will seek revenge." I squared my shoulders, feeling a mix of fear and determination. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The race against time had only just begun, and the future of the city, perhaps the world, hung in the balance. But for the first time since this all began, I felt like we had a fighting chance. The truth was out there, hope was spreading, and we had assembled a team capable of facing whatever darkness lay ahead. As we disappeared into the bustling crowd, I couldn't help but feel that the real adventure was only just beginning. The battle for New York's future was on, and I was right in the middle of it. The makeshift command center hummed with activity. What had once been a nondescript warehouse in Brooklyn was now filled with computers, monitors, and a team of FBI agents and civilian specialists working around the clock. In the center of it all stood a large whiteboard covered in notes, pictures, and red string connecting various points of interest across a map of New York City. I stood before the board, my eyes burning from lack of sleep, trying to make sense of the patterns we'd uncovered over the past week. Emily sat nearby, furiously typing on her laptop, while Agent Reeves paced back and forth, barking orders into his phone. "Anything new?" I asked Emily as she paused to rub her tired eyes. She shook her head. Nothing concrete, but there's definitely a pattern to the energy fluctuations we've been tracking. Whatever this entity is, it's moving. Luna, who had become a constant presence in our investigations, jumped onto the table next to Emily's laptop. "It's preparing," she said, her gravelly voice low and ominous, gathering strength for its next move. Reeves ended his call and joined us, his face grim. "We've got reports of increased paranormal activity across the city. Unexplained blackouts, strange sightings, people experiencing intense nightmares. Whatever this thing is, it's affecting the whole city." I turned back to the board, my mind racing. We need to find a way to stop it, to banish it, or contain it, or something. "About that," Emily said, her voice hesitant, "I think I might have found something." All eyes turned to her as she pulled up a series of ancient-looking documents on her screen. "I've been digging through occult archives, looking for anything that might help, and I found this, an old ritual that's supposed to be able to banish evil entities." Reeves leaned in, skepticism written across his face. "A ritual? You can't be serious." "At this point," I said, "I think we have to consider every option. What does this ritual involve, Em?" Emily scrolled through the documents. "It's complicated. We need specific ingredients, most of which are rare and scattered across the city. And it has to be performed at a nexus point of mystical energy." Luna's ears perked up. "The ritual of binding," she said, her yellow eyes gleaming. "It's powerful magic, but dangerous. If performed incorrectly, it could make the entity stronger instead of banishing it." A heavy silence fell over the room as we all considered the implications. Finally, Reeves spoke up. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but let's do it. We're out of other options, and this thing needs to be stopped before it does any more damage." And so began our desperate race to gather the components for the ritual. We split into teams, each tasked with finding a specific ingredient. Emily and I were sent to find a rare herb that supposedly only grew in a hidden garden in Central Park. As we made our way through the park, the usual bustle of New York seemed muted, as if the whole city was holding its breath. The sky was overcast, casting everything in a grayish hue. "Do you really think this will work?" Emily asked as we pushed through a thick patch of bushes. I sighed, brushing leaves out of my hair. "I don't know, but we have to try something. And hey, if a talking cat can predict the future, why can't an ancient ritual banish an evil entity?" Emily chuckled, but it was a tense sound. "Fair point. I can't shake this feeling that we're in over our heads." Before I could respond, we stumbled into a small clearing. In the center, bathed in a shaft of sunlight breaking through the clouds, was a patch of silvery plants that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. "That's it," I breathed. "The moonshade herb." As I reached out to pluck one of the plants, a sharp pain shot through my hand. I jerked back with a cry, watching in horror as a small cut on my palm began to bleed. "Sarah!" Emily exclaimed, grabbing my hand to examine the wound. "Are you okay?" I nodded, but a sense of unease settled over me. "Yeah, I'm fine. Like, that wasn't there before. It's like the plant defended itself." Luna's warning echoed in my mind. Not all darkness is evil, and not all light is good. We carefully harvested the herb and made our way back to the command center. The other teams had returned as well, each with their own stories of near misses and strange occurrences while gathering their ingredients. As night fell, we prepared for the ritual. Reeves had managed to clear out a section of Battery Park, which Luna had identified as a nexus point of mystical energy. We formed a circle, each holding a component of the ritual. Luna sat in the center, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Remember," she said, her voice resonating with power, The ritual must be performed with absolute precision. Any mistake could have catastrophic consequences. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Okay, let's do this. We began the ritual, chanting words in a language none of us understood. The air around us began to thicken, charged with an electric energy that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. As we reached the climax of the ritual, pouring the gathered ingredients into a central bowl, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe this would work. Maybe we could end this nightmare once and for all. But then, everything went wrong. The bowl erupted in a geyser of dark energy, shattering the windows of nearby buildings. A wave of force knocked us all off our feet. I hit the ground hard, my ears ringing from the explosion. As I struggled to my feet, I saw Luna standing at the edge of the ritual circle, her fur standing on end. "No," she hissed, her voice filled with dismay. "It's gone wrong. The entity. It's feeding on the ritual's power." Horror washed over me as I realized what had happened. Our attempt to banish the entity had only made it stronger. The sky above us darkened, clouds swirling in an unnatural pattern. Lightning crackles, illuminating a shape in the clouds, something vast and formless and utterly alien. "What have we done?" Emily whispered, her face pale with shock. Reeves was already on his phone calling for backup. "We need to evacuate the area. Now." As chaos erupted around us, people fleeing from the park in terror, I felt a presence behind me. I turned to see Luna, her yellow eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "The entity is preparing for its final move," she said. "The city will face its darkest hour. What can we do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "How do we stop it?" Luna's gaze met mine, and I saw something in those ancient eyes that sent a chill down my spine. "There is one way," she said softly, "but the cost. Sarah, are you prepared to sacrifice everything?" Before I could respond, a deafening roar filled the air. The swirling clouds above us parted, revealing a void of absolute darkness. And from that void, a voice spoke her not in words, but in feelings of dread and despair that washed over the city like a tidal wave. I watched in horror as people around us fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the entity's psychic assault. Even Reeves, hardened FBI agent that he was, staggered under the weight of it. But somehow I remained standing. Whether it was Luna's influence or something within me, I felt a core of resistance against the entity's power. "Sarah," Emily called out, fighting against the psychic onslaught. "What do we do?" I looked at my sister, then at Reeves and the other agents struggling to maintain order. I thought of the millions of people in New York, now at the mercy of this ancient, malevolent force, and I knew what I had to do. Turning back to Luna, I squared my shoulders and met her gaze. "Whatever it takes," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "Tell me what I need to do." Luna nodded solemnly. "Then listen carefully, Sarah. For the fate of the city, perhaps the world, now rests in your hands." As the entity's power continued to grow, darkness spreading across the sky like spilled ink, I steeled myself for what was to come. Our failed attempt had brought us to the brink of disaster, but I was determined that it wouldn't be the end. Whatever the cost, whatever sacrifice was required, I would face it. For New York, for Emily, for the future Luna had shown me glimpses of a future worth fighting for. The battle for the soul of the city had reached its critical point, and I was ready to make my stand. The city was in chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, punctuated by the occasional sound of shattering glass or screeching tires. The entity's psychic assault had thrown New York into a state of panic, and the darkness spreading across the sky only added to the growing sense of doom. Luna led us through the panicked crowds, her small form somehow managing to part the sea of terrified humanity. Emily, Reeves, and I followed close behind, struggling to keep up. "Where are we going?" I shouted over the cacophony of the city in crisis. Luna's voice, somehow clear despite the chaos, replied, "To the one who might have answers, the keeper of forgotten lore." We wound our way through narrow alleys and back streets, eventually emerging in a quiet corner of the East Village. Before us stood a small, unassuming shop wedged between a trendy cafe and a vintage clothing store. The sign above the door read Arcana Obscura in faded gold lettering. As we approached, the door swung open of its own accord. A wizened old woman stood in the doorway, her eyes milky with cataracts yet seeming to see right through us. "I've been expecting you," she said, her voice creaking like old timber. "Come in quickly. Time grows short." We filed into the shop, which was crammed floor to ceiling with books, artifacts, and oddities that defied description. The old woman closed the door behind us, and suddenly the chaos of the outside world seemed muffled, distant. "I am Madame Vesper," the old woman said, making her way behind a cluttered counter. "And you, my dear," she pointed a gnarled finger at me, "are the one who stands at the crossroads." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. "You know why we're here?" Madame Vesper nodded solemnly. "The Ancient One stirs, awakened by your failed ritual. The city teeters on the brink of oblivion." Reeves stepped forward, his FBI training kicking in despite the surreal circumstances. "Ma'am, we need information. How do we stop this entity?" The old woman's unseeing eyes seemed to focus on Reeves for a moment. "Ah, the man of logic and law. In this battle, your weapons are useless. This is a war of will and spirit." Emily, who had been examining the strange artifacts around the shop, spoke up. "But there has to be something we can do. Some way to fight back." Madame Vesper turned her attention to my sister, a small smile playing on her lips. "The bond of blood. Yes, that will be important." She then looked directly at me. "But the choice and the sacrifice must be yours alone." My heart pounded in my chest. What choice? What sacrifice? The old woman reached beneath the counter and pulled out an ancient, leather-bound book. As she opened it, dust motes danced in the air, glowing with an otherworldly light. "The entity you face is as old as the city itself," Madame Vesper explained, her fingers tracing lines of text I couldn't read. "It has fed on the fears, the ambitions, the darkness in the hearts of millions. To defeat it, one must offer something of equal value." A chill ran down my spine as understanding dawned. "A life," I whispered. "He wants a life." Madame Vesper nodded gravely. "Not just any life. A life freely given with full knowledge of the consequences. A true sacrifice." The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Emily was the first to break the silence, her voice choked with emotion. "No," she said firmly. "Absolutely not. There has to be another way." Reeves nodded in agreement. "We don't trade lives. There must be some other solution, some weapon we can use." But even as they spoke, I felt a sense of certainty settling over me. I turned to Luna, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since we entered the shop. "You knew," I said softly. "You knew it would come to this." Luna met my gaze, her yellow eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and pride. "I saw the possibility, but the choice was always yours to make." Madame Vesper closed the book with a soft thud. "The entity cannot be destroyed, only bound. But the binding requires an anchor, a soul to hold it in check. And that's supposed to be me?" I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The old woman nodded. "You open the door to this realm for the cat," she gestured to Luna. "You have been marked by fate. The choice is yours, but know this. If you refuse, the entity will consume the city, and from there, the world." Emily grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Seta. Lo. "You can't do this. We'll find another way. We always do." I looked at my sister, feeling a wave of love and regret wash over me. I don't think we have time to find another way. Look outside." We all turned to the shop's small, grimy window. The darkness had spread further, tendrils of shadow writhing across the sky like living things. In the distance, we could see flashes of unnatural light and hear the rumble of what sounded like thunder, but felt more sinister. Reeves ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. Even if we agreed to this insane plan, how would it even work? How does one person hold back an entity that powerful? Madame Vesper smiled, a knowing look in her sightless eyes. "With this," she said, reaching into a drawer and pulling out a small, unassuming pendant. It was a simple design, a circle of metal with strange symbols etched around its edge. "The seal of binding," Luna said, recognition in her voice. "I thought it was lost centuries ago." The old woman held out the pendant to me. "Take it, child. If you choose to make the sacrifice, this will be your anchor. Your consciousness will be bound to it, holding the entity in check for as long as the seal remains intact." With trembling hands, I took the pendant, felt warm to the touch, almost alive. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Madame Vesper's expression softened. "That I cannot say. Could be years, could be centuries. Time moves differently in the realm between." Emily let out a choked sob. "This isn't fair. It's too much to ask of one person." I turned to my sister, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Do you remember when we were kids, and you fell into the river? Everyone said it was impossible, but I dove in and pulled you out." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You saved my life, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat," I said, squeezing her hand. "This is no different. I have a chance to save not just you, but everyone. How can I not take it?" Reeves stepped forward, his expression torn between admiration and dismay. "Walker, I can't sanction this. It goes against everything I've sworn to uphold." I gave him a small smile. "I know, but sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same. You've seen what we're up against. You know what's at stake." He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "For what it's worth, you're the bravest person I've ever met." I turned back to Madame Vesper and Luna. "What do I need to do?" The old woman began to explain the ritual, her words blurring together as the reality of what I was about to do sank in. As she spoke, I felt Luna brush against my leg. "Sarah," the cat said, her voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "You've come so far from that rainy night when you took in a stray. Know that whatever happens, you've already changed the course of history. You've given this city, these people, a fighting chance." I knelt down, tears welling in my eyes as I stroked Luna's soft fur. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." As I stood, I looked at the faces around me. Emily, my beloved sister. Reeves, the skeptic-turned-ally. Luna, my impossible guide. And Madame Vesper, the keeper of ancient secrets. Each of them had played a part in bringing me to this moment. I clutched the seal of binding, feeling its power thrumming through me. Outside, the entity's assault on the city intensified, as if sensing the challenge to its dominion. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady and clear, as Madame Vesper began the ritual. As Emily's tears fell and Reeves stood at attention like a sentinel. As Luna's eyes glowed with ancient power, I felt a sense of purpose unlike anything I'd ever known. This was my choice, my sacrifice, my stand against the darkness that threatened to consume everything I loved. Whatever came next, I would face it with courage and conviction. For New York, for the world, for the future, the ultimate choice had been made. The final battle was about to begin. The air crackled with energy as we made our way to the heart of Central Park. The once lush greenery was now withered and gray, as if the very life had been sucked out of it. The sky above was a roiling mass of darkness, punctuated by flashes of sickly green lightning. I clutched the seal of binding, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill that had settled over the city. Emily walked beside me, her hand firmly grasped in mine. Reeves followed close behind, his gun drawn, though we all knew it would be useless against what we faced. Luna led the way, her small form a beacon of determination in the growing gloom. As we approached Bethesda Fountain, now dry and cracked, and deep, resonating laugh echoed around us. The entity's voice, when it came, seemed to bypass our ears and speak directly into our minds. "So the little prophet comes to face me at last," it said, its tone a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Do you really think you can stop what has already begun?" I stepped forward, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "I'm here to end this, to send you back to whatever dark realm you came from." The entity's laughter grew louder, and the darkness around us seemed to thicken. "Foolish child, I am this realm. I am the shadows in every alley, the fear in every heart. I am New York itself." As if to emphasize its point, the ground beneath our feet began to tremble. In the distance, we could hear the sound of shattering glass and twisting metal as buildings began to warp and crumble. "Sarah," Emily's voice was tight with fear, "whatever you're going to do, I think you need to do it now." I nodded, turning to Madame Vesper, who had insisted on accompanying us despite her age. "What's the first step?" The old woman's unseeing eyes seemed to look past me, into some other realm. "The seal must be activated with your blood, freely given. Then you must speak the words of binding." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. As I raised the seal to my palm, ready to cut it open, the entity's voice boomed once more. "Wait!" it cried, and for the first time, I heard a note of desperation in its tone. "You don't know what you're doing. The sacrifice, it's not what you think." I hesitated, the seal hovering just above my skin. "What do you mean?" The darkness around us coalesced, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape. "The cat," it said, gesturing towards Luna. "Ask her what she really is. Ask her about the true nature of the sacrifice." I turned to Luna, confusion and a growing sense of dread battling within me. "Luna? What's it talking about?" Luna's yellow eyes met mine, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw genuine sorrow in their depths. "I'm sorry, Sada. There's so much I couldn't tell you, so much you weren't ready to know. Tell me now," I demanded, my voice shaking. Luna sighed, a sound so human it sent chills down my spine. "The entity speaks the truth in its way. I am not just a cat or a prophet. I am a guardian, a being as old as the one you face, tasked with keeping the balance." Reeves stepped forward, his gun now trained on Luna. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," Luna said, her voice taking on an otherworldly resonance, "that the sacrifice is not what you believed. The seal doesn't just bind the entity. It binds both of us, light and dark, in eternal balance." The realization hit me like a physical blow. You knew all along. You led me to this point knowing what it would mean." Luna nodded, her form beginning to shimmer and change. "It was the only way. The entity had grown too strong, the balance too far shifted. We needed a human soul, freely given, to reset the scales." Emily grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with horror. "Sarah, don't listen to them. This is crazy. We need to get out of here." But even as she spoke, I knew it was too late. The pieces were falling into place, Luna's cryptic warnings, the entity's desperate plea, the true meaning of the prophecies. This had been the plan all along. The entity's form writhed, its voice a mixture of anger and fear. "You see now, don't you? The cat is no better than I am. We are two sides of the same coin, light and dark, forever in conflict, and forever in balance," Luna added, her form now a brilliant counterpoint to the entity's darkness. "That is the way it must be, the way it has always been." I looked down at the seal in my hand, then at the faces around me, Emily, tears streaming down her cheeks. Reeves, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. Madame Vesper, a sad smile on her ancient face. "If I do this," I said slowly, "if I activate the seal, what happens?" Luna's light dimmed slightly. "You will become the anchor, the point of balance between us. Your consciousness will exist outside of time, holding us in check for as long as the seal remains intact." "And the city?" asked. "The people will be saved," the entity growled, returned to their blissful ignorance, never knowing how close they came to oblivion. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the choice before me. Everything I had been through, every prophecy and warning had led to this moment. I thought of the millions of lives in the balance, of the future I had glimpsed in Luna's prophecies, a future worth fighting for. When I opened my eyes, I knew what I had to do. "Sarah, no," Emily cried, realizing my decision. She lunged forward, but Reeves held her back. "I'm sorry, Anne," I said, feeling a tear slide down my cheek. "I love you. Always remember that." Before anyone could stop me, I pressed the seal against my palm and squeezed. Pain lanced through my hand as blood welled up, coating the ancient metal. The effect was immediate. The seal began to glow, pulsing with a power that made the air around us hum. I felt a tugging sensation, as if my very essence was being pulled into the small circle of metal. "The words," Madame Vesper called out. "You must speak the words of binding." As if in a trance, I began to recite words in a language I didn't understand. With each syllable, the power grew stronger. The entity and Luna were being drawn towards the seal, their forms stretching and distorting. "Sarah," Emily's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Please, don't do this." I wanted to tell her it would be okay, that this was the right thing to do. But I couldn't stop the flow of words from my lips. As I spoke the final syllable, there was a blinding flash of light. I felt myself being torn apart and remade, my consciousness expanding to encompass something vast and incomprehensible. In that moment, I understood everything. I saw the long history of the entity and Luna, their eternal dance of light and dark. I saw the countless times they had nearly tipped the balance, and the human souls who had sacrificed themselves to restore it. And I saw the future not just of New York, but of the world. A future where the balance was maintained, where humanity continued to struggle and grow and evolve. As my awareness settled into its new state, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had made the right choice. The light faded, and the park returned to normal. The entity and Luna were gone, now bound within the seal. Then I was everywhere and nowhere, a constant presence just beyond the veil of reality. I watched as Emily collapsed to her knees, clutching the now dormant seal and sobbing. Reeves knelt beside her, offering what comfort he could. Madame Vesper stood silently, her unseeing eyes somehow finding mine in my new form. "Well done, child," she whispered. "The balance is restored." As the sun began to rise over New York, I felt the city awakening. People emerged from their homes, blinking in confusion at the new day. The damage from the entity's assault was gone, erased as if it had never happened. In the days and weeks that followed, I watched over the city and its people. I saw Emily and Reeves working to understand what had happened, to find some way to bring me back. I saw the subtle ways my sacrifice had changed things. A little more kindness here, a little more courage there. And I realized that this was my final prophecy. not one of doom and destruction, but of hope and resilience. As long as there were people willing to stand against the darkness, willing to make the hard choices and the ultimate sacrifices, there would always be a future worth fighting for. New York, my city, would go on, and I would be there, always watching, always protecting, a silent guardian in the space between light and dark. The story of the talking cat and the reluctant prophet was over, but the story of New York, of humanity, of the eternal balance between light and dark, that story would continue, with me as its unseen narrator, for as long as the seal remained unbroken. And somehow I knew that would be a very long time indeed. And this was a report. Before we go to the next one, leave your opinion in the comments. We would love to know. Now let's move on to the next one. The hot water cascaded over my body, steam rising in lazy spirals around me. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth seep into my muscles, easing the familiar ache that never quite seemed to leave. Another day in Paradise, Texas. Another day of pretending to be normal. As I reached for the soap, my hand brushed against the rough, raised skin on my chest, a souvenir from Fallujah. I'd long since stopped paying attention to my scars. They were just another part of me, like my brown eyes or the crow's feet that had started to appear at their corners. But today was different. As I stepped out of the shower, wiping condensation from the mirror with my forearm, something caught my eye. I leaned closer, squinting at my reflection. "What the hell?" I muttered, tracing a finger along a line of scar tissue that ran from my left shoulder to my sternum. It wasn't the scar itself that grabbed my attention. I knew that one well enough. It was the way it seemed to connect to other scars, forming a pattern I'd never noticed before. My heart began to race as I examined my torso more closely. The scars I'd accumulated over years of military service, from shrapnel, bullets, and one particularly nasty encounter with a piece of rebar, suddenly seemed less random, less chaotic. They formed lines, intersections, a network across my skin that looked disturbingly intentional. "No," I whispered, my voice sounding strange and hollow in the small bathroom. "No, that's not possible." But the longer I looked, the more certain I became. The scars on my body formed a map. My hands began to shake as I traced the lines, a chill running down my spine despite the lingering warmth from the shower. This couldn't be a coincidence. But if it wasn't, what did it mean? I stumbled out of the bathroom, barely remembering to wrap a towel around my waist. My dog, Max, looked up from his bed in the corner of my bedroom, his tail thumping against the floor in a lazy greeting. "You see this, buddy?" I asked, gesturing to my chest. Max cocked his head to the side, clearly confused by my behavior. "Yeah, I don't get it either." I rummaged through my dresser, pulling out an old t-shirt and a pair of jeans. As I got dressed, my mind raced. How long had this pattern been there? How had I never noticed it before? More importantly, what did it mean? As soon as the question formed in my mind, a flash of memory hit me like a physical blow. Sand, blood, screams. I gasped, gripping the edge of the dresser as the images assaulted me. The smell of cordite and burning flesh filled my nostrils. I could hear the rattling of gunfire, the dull thud of explosions in the distance. "No," I growled, squeezing my eyes shut. "Not now. Not again." I focused on my breathing, using the techniques my therapist had taught me. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Slowly, the memories receded, leaving behind a dull ache in my temples and a knot of anxiety in my stomach. What the hell was happening to me? I glanced at the clock on my nightstand. 0930. I was supposed to meet my sister for brunch in an hour. For a moment, I considered canceling. How was I supposed to act normal when my world had just been turned upside down? But the thought of sitting alone in my apartment, staring at my scars and spiraling into God knows what kind of mental state, was even less appealing. I finished getting dressed and headed for the door, pausing only to give Max a quick pat on the head. "Be good, buddy. I'll be back soon." The Texas sun hit me like a physical force as I stepped outside. Paradise was a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. As I walked down Main Street towards the diner, I nodded at familiar faces, hoping my smile didn't look as forced as it felt. "Morning, Alex," called Mrs. Henderson from her flower shop. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I managed a wave and a grunt that could pass for agreement. Beautiful, bright, if she only knew. The bell above the door jingled as I entered Rosie's diner. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, and for a moment, I felt almost normal. Then I caught sight of my reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser on the counter, and the illusion shattered. "Alex," my sister's voice cut through my thoughts. I turned to see Sarah waving from a booth in the corner. "Over here." I made my way over, sliding into the seat across from her. Sarah's smile faltered as she got a good look at my face. "Geez, Alex, you look like you've seen a ghost. Are you okay?" I opened my mouth to say yes, to brush off her concern like I always did, but the words stuck in my throat. I don't know," I admitted. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. In the 5 years since I'd returned from my last tour, I'd never once admitted to being anything less than fine. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice low and serious. I glanced around the diner. It was busy, full of the usual Sunday morning crowd. Not exactly the place for a private conversation about mysterious scar maps and resurfacing war memories. "It's complicated," I said. "Can we talk about it after we eat?" Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but nodded. "Okay, but you're not getting out of this, big brother. Something's clearly wrong, and we're going to figure it out." I managed a weak smile. "Thanks, sis." We ordered eggs and bacon for Sarah, just coffee for me. My stomach was too tied up in knots to even think about food. As we waited for our order, Sarah chatted about her week, her latest art project, the date she'd been on last Friday. I tried to listen, to engage, but my mind kept drifting back to the scars, to the flashes of memory that felt more like premonitions of doom. "Alex," Sarah's voice snapped me back to the present. "You didn't hear a word I just said, did you?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I'm sorry, Sara. I'm just distracted." "Distracted?" "Alex, you look like you're about to jump out of your skin. What's really going on?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Sarah had always been there for me, even when I'd pushed her away after coming home. She deserved the truth, or at least as much of it as I understood myself. "Something's happening to me," I said quietly. "Something I can't explain." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes wide with concern. "What do you mean?" I glanced around again, making sure no one was paying attention to us. Then, slowly, I rolled up my sleeve, revealing the network of scars on my forearm. "Do you see it?" asked. Sarah frowned, studying my arm. "See what?" "Your scars. Look closer," I urged. "Don't you see the pattern?" Her frown deepened as she looked more carefully. Then, suddenly, her eyes widened. "Oh my God," she breathed. "It looks like a map or something." I nodded, relieved that I wasn't completely losing my mind. "It's not just my arm. It's all over my body. And I swear, Sarah, it wasn't like this before. Or if it was, I never noticed it." "How is that possible?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted, "but that's not even the worst part." I told her about the flashes of memory, the vivid sensations of being back in the war. As I spoke, I could see the worry in her eyes growing. "Alex," she said when I finished, "this sounds serious. Maybe we should talk to Dr. Patel. He might be able to No. I cut her off more sharply than I intended. No doctors. Not yet. I need to figure this out on my own first. Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have stopped her. Okay, she said finally, but promise me you'll be careful, and that you'll come to me if things get worse. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. I promise. As we left the diner, the Texas sun seemed harsher than before. I squinted against the glare, feeling exposed, vulnerable, as if the map on my skin was visible to everyone, broadcasting my secrets to the world. What are you going to do now? Sarah asked as we stood on the sidewalk. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of thoughts in my head. I'm going to go home, try to make sense of this map, see if I can figure out what it means. Sarah nodded, though she still looked worried. Call me if you need anything, anytime. Okay? I will, I promised. As I watched her walk away, I felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of isolation. Whatever was happening to me, whatever I had buried so deep that my own body had become a roadmap to its hiding place, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. I turned and began the walk back to my apartment, each step feeling heavier than the last. The scars on my skin seemed to burn, a constant reminder of the mystery I had to solve. What had I forgotten? And more importantly, did I really want to remember? As I reached my front door, I paused, my hand on the knob. Once I stepped inside, once I really started to unravel this mystery, there would be no going back. I could still walk away, pretend I'd never noticed the map on my skin, never felt those flashes of memory. But deep down, I knew that wasn't an option. Whatever I'd buried, it was clawing its way back to the surface. And I had a sinking feeling that if I didn't confront it on my own terms, it would consume me entirely. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped inside. It was time to face my past, whatever the cost. The darkness was suffocating. I could hear the rapid thump of my heartbeat, feel the grit of sand between my teeth. The air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder and something else, something metallic and sickeningly sweet. Clear, a voice shouted, too close, too loud. I turned, my rifle at the ready, scanning for threats in the inky blackness. A flash of movement caught my eye, and I squeezed the trigger without thinking. The muzzle flash illuminated a face for a split second, young, terrified, innocent. Lo! I screamed, bolting upright in bed. Sweat soaked my sheets, and my t-shirt clung to my body like a second skin. I gasped for air, my eyes darting around the room, half expecting to see the mud brick walls of a compound in Fallujah instead of my familiar bedroom in Paradise, Texas. Max whined softly from his bed in the corner, his tail thumping against the floor in concern. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, planting my feet firmly on the cool hardwood floor, trying to ground myself in the present. It's okay, buddy, I murmured, more for my own benefit than his. Just a dream, just a goddamn dream. But it wasn't just a dream, was it? The images had been too vivid, too specific. The weight of the rifle in my hands, the smell of the air, the face illuminated in the muzzle flash, it all felt like memory rather than nightmare. I stumbled to the bathroom, flicking on the harsh fluorescent light. My reflection in the mirror looked haggard, dark circles under my eyes, a day's worth of stubble on my jaw. But it wasn't my face that held my attention. With trembling hands, I pulled off my sweat-soaked t-shirt. The scars stood out starkly against my skin, the pattern I'd discovered yesterday even more pronounced in the unforgiving bathroom light. What are you trying to tell me? I whispered, tracing the lines with my fingertips. As if in response, another flash of memory hit me. A dusty road stretching out ahead, the rumble of engines, the weight of a decision pressing down on me like a physical force. I gripped the edges of the sink, my knuckles turning white as I rode out the wave of memory. When it passed, I was left with a certainty that chilled me to my core. Whatever I'd buried, whatever secret my scars were trying to reveal, it had something to do with that convoy, that mission. I needed to know more. Ignoring the early hour, I went to my desk and booted up my laptop. My hands shook slightly as I typed out an email. To martinez.carlos@gmail.com. miltomartinez.carlos@gmail.com. Subject: Need to talk, Carlos. I know it's been a while, and I'm sorry to reach out like this. Something's come up, something about our last tour. I need to know if you remember anything unusual about our final mission. The convoy. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Hope you're doing well. Alex. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then leaned back in my chair, running my hands over my face. Carlos Martinez had been my best friend in the unit, the one person I trusted implicitly. If anyone could help me make sense of these fragmented memories, it was him. Assuming, of course, that he was willing to dig up the past we'd both tried so hard to bury. I spent the next few hours alternating between pacing my small apartment and staring at my laptop, willing a response to appear. Max followed me anxiously, picking up on my agitation. It was nearly noon when my phone finally buzzed. I snatched it up, my heart racing when I saw Carlos's name on the screen. Carlos, I said, my voice hoarse. Thanks for calling. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Carlos spoke, his voice was guarded. Alex, it's been a while. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry about that. It's just... I trailed off, unsure how to explain. Your email, Carlos said. You asked about the convoy. I swallowed hard. Yeah, I've been remembering things, bits and pieces, but it doesn't make sense. I thought maybe you could help fill in the gaps. Another long silence. I could almost see Carlos weighing his words carefully. Alex, man, we agreed not to talk about that. To leave it in the past where it belongs. I know, I said, pacing again. But something's happening, Carlos. I can't explain it. Fine. I think I need to remember. To understand. Understand what? Carlos's voice had an edge to it now. Alex, whatever you think you're remembering, just let it go. Trust me on this. His words sent a chill down my spine. Carlos, what are you telling me? I heard him take a deep breath. Look, I can't do this over the phone. If you really want to know, I'll send you something. But Alex, I'm warning you, once you open this door, there's no closing it. Are you sure you're ready for that? Was I? The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to listen to Carlos, to let sleeping dogs lie. But the map on my skin, the fragments of memory haunting my dreams, they demanded answers. I'm sure, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. Send it. All right, Carlos said, sounding resigned. Check your mailbox in a couple of days. And Alex, be careful, brother. The line went dead, leaving me standing in the middle of my living room, my mind reeling. What had Carlos meant? What was he sending me? And why did he sound so afraid? The next 2 days were an exercise in patience, or rather, the lack of it. I couldn't focus on anything, couldn't sleep for more than an hour at a time without jolting awake, drenched in sweat and haunted by half-remembered nightmares. I spent hours in front of the mirror, sketching the patterns of my scars onto paper, trying to make sense of the map etched into my skin. But without context, without understanding what I was looking at, it was just a maze of lines and intersections that led nowhere. On the third day, I nearly knocked over the elderly postman in my haste to get to the mailbox. Among the bills and junk mail was a plain manila envelope, no return address. My hands shook as I tore it open, spilling the contents onto my kitchen table. A folded map, yellowed with age. A handwritten note. I unfolded the map first. It showed a region of Afghanistan I recognized all too well. the area where we'd been stationed on our last tour. Certain locations were circled in red ink, connected by lines that looked disturbingly familiar. My breath caught in my throat as I realized what I was looking at. The lines on the map, they matched the pattern of scars on my body. With trembling fingers, I picked up Carlos's note. "Alex, I hoped this day would never come. But if you're reading this, I guess we both knew deep down that the past has a way of catching up to us. The map shows the region where it all went down. The circled locations, you'll figure it out. Your scars aren't just from the wounds you took in battle, brother. They're a message, a warning, from you to you. There's more, a lot more, but I can't put it in writing. If you really want to know the truth, meet me at the old fishing cabin where we used to go on leave. You remember the place. Come alone. And Alex, watch your back. We're not the only ones who remember what happened out there." Carlos, I sat heavily in a kitchen chair, the note crumpling in my fist. See my shirt dampened with blood. One of my scars had split open, a thin red line seeping through the fabric. "Sid," I muttered, hulling over to the shoulder of the road. I rummaged in the glove compartment for the first aid kit I always kept there, an old habit from my army days. As I pressed a gauze pad to the wound, I couldn't help but wonder if this was some kind of sign. Was my body literally tearing itself apart as I got closer to the truth? Back on the road, the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It would be dark by the time I reached the cabin. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, despite the warmth of the evening. My phone buzzed, startling me. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hey, sis," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Alex, where are you?" Sarah's voice was tight with worry. "I stopped by your place and you weren't there." Max looked like he hadn't been walked in hours. Guilt twisted in my gut. In my rush to leave, I'd completely forgotten about my loyal companion. "I'm sorry, Sarah. Something came up. I had to leave town for a bit." "Leave town? Alex, what's going on? Is this about those scars you showed me?" I sighed, debating how much to tell her. Sarah had always been my rock, the one person I could count on no matter what. But this felt dangerous. I couldn't risk dragging her into it. "It's complicated," I said finally. "I'm meeting an old army buddy. He might have some answers about what happened over there." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was soft, concerned. "Alex, please be careful. I don't know what's going on, but I've got a bad feeling about this." "I will," I promised. "Nuck, can you check on Max for me? Make sure he's fed and walked? I shouldn't be gone more than a day or two." "Of course," Sarah said. "Just come back safe, okay? And call me if you need anything. Anything at all." "I will," I said again, hoping it wasn't a lie. "Thanks, sis." As I ended the call, a wave of loneliness washed over me. Part of me wished I'd told Sarah everything, asked her to come with me. But no, this was my burden to bear, my mystery to solve. The sun had fully set by the time I turned onto the dirt road leading to the cabin. The headlights of my truck cut through the darkness, illuminating twisted tree trunks and overgrown bushes. It had been years since anyone had used this old access road, and nature was slowly reclaiming it. As I rounded the final bend, the cabin came into view. It looked smaller than I remembered, more decrepit. The wooden walls were weathered and gray, the roof sagging slightly in the middle. But a warm light glowed from the windows, and a familiar truck was parked out front. Carlos was here. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the tick of the cooling metal and the chorus of cicadas in the surrounding woods. This was it. Whatever answers I'd come looking for, they were waiting for me inside that cabin. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the truck. The humid night air clung to my skin as I approached the door. I raised my hand to knock, but before I could, the door swung open. Carlos stood there, backlit by the warm glow of the cabin's interior. He looked older than I remembered, his face lined with worry, his hair streaked with gray, but his eyes were the same dark, intense, haunted by things we'd both seen and done. "Alex," he said, his voice gruff. "You town?" "Yeah," I replied, suddenly at a loss for words. "What do you say to a man you haven't seen in years? A man who holds the key to unlocking your buried past." Carlos stepped back, gesturing for me to enter. The cabin was much as I remembered it. A single room with a small kitchenette in one corner, a ratty couch against one wall, and a rickety table with 2 chairs in the center. A kerosene lamp on the table cast long shadows across the room. "Beer?" Carlos asked, already moving towards the small refrigerator. I nodded, taking a seat at the table. Carlos returned with 2 bottles, condensation beating on the glass. We both took long pulls from our beers, the silence stretching between us. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Carlos, what the hell is going on? These scars, the map, the memories. What aren't you telling me?" Carlos sighed heavily, setting his beer down with a dull thunk. "It's not that simple, Alex. What happened out there, it's not something you can just explain. It's something you have to remember on your own." Frustration bubbled up inside me. "Damn it, Carlos, I didn't drive all the way out here for riddles. I need answers, and I'm trying to give them to you." Carlos snapped back, then more softly, "But you have to understand, Alex. We made a pact, all of us who were there that day. We swore we'd never speak of it, that we'd take it to our graves. But the scars," I insisted. "The map, I did that to myself, didn't I? Why would I do that if I wanted to forget?" Carlos's eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of pity and fear. "Because you knew even then that someday you'd need to remember. That someday, the truth would have to come out." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, battered notebook. "I kept a journal during our last tour. It's all in here, everything that happened, everything we did. But Alex, I'm warning you one last time. Once you read this, there's no going back. Are you sure you want to know?" I stared at the notebook, my heart pounding in my chest. Did I want to know? The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to walk away, to go back to my life in paradise and forget all about this. But the scars on my body, the fragments of memory haunting my dreams, they demanded answers. With a shaking hand, I reached out and took the notebook. "I'm sure." Carlos nodded solemnly. "All right, but not here. This place, it's not safe. We need to go somewhere else. Somewhere they can't find us." A chill ran down my spine. "Bray? Who's they?" "Carlos." Before he could answer, a blinding light flooded the cabin. The roar of engines filled the air, and a voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is the United States Military Police. We have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Carlos's face drained of color. "Set, they found us. Alex, we need to go. Now." "So where?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. What the hell is going on? Carlos was already moving, grabbing a backpack from behind the couch. "There's a tunnel under the cabin, leads out to the lake. It's our only chance. Come on." As Carlos pulled up a trapdoor hidden under a rug, the sound of boots on the porch made me freeze. This was really happening. We were being hunted by our own military. What had we done to deserve this? With one last look at the door, I made my decision. I dove for the trapdoor, following Carlos into the darkness below. As we scrambled through the narrow, earthen tunnel, the sound of splintering would echoed behind us. They were in the cabin. "Keep moving," Carlos hissed ahead of me. "Don't stop for anything." My lungs burned as we ran, crouched over in the low tunnel. The notebook was clutched tightly in my hand, suddenly feeling like the most important thing in the world. We emerged on a small, pebbly beach, the dark waters of Lake Texoma lapping at the shore. A small motorboat was pulled up on the sand. "Jet in," Carlos ordered, already pushing the boat into the water. As we roared away from the shore, I could see flashlight beams dancing through the trees where we'd emerged. We'd made it out just in time. I turned to Carlos, my mind reeling from everything that had just happened. "All right, now you have to tell me. What the hell did we do, Carlos? Why is the military after us?" Carlos's face was grim in the moonlight as he steered the boat towards the center of the lake. "It's all in that notebook, Alex. The truth about the convoy, about what we found out there in the desert, about why we had to bury it so deep." I looked down at the battered notebook in my hands. Whatever secrets it held, they were big enough to turn the U.S. military against its own soldiers. Big enough for me to carve a map into my own skin. As the shore faded into darkness behind us, I opened the notebook with trembling hands. It was time to remember. The steady hum of the airplane engines filled my ears as I stared out the window at the endless expanse of clouds below. My reflection in the glass looked haggard, dark circles under my eyes. A few days' worth of stubble on my jaw. I barely recognized myself. It had been 3 days since that night at the cabin. 3 days of running, hiding, and trying to process the horrifying truth I'd uncovered in Carlos's journal. The weight of it sat in my chest like a lead ball, making it hard to breathe. "Sir, would you like something to drink?" I startled at the flight attendant's voice, my hand instinctively going to the scar on my ribs, the one that matched the coordinates written in the journal. Just water, please." As she poured the water, I caught her glancing at my hands. They were shaking slightly, and I could see the concern in her eyes. I must have looked like a nervous wreck. "First time flying?" she asked kindly. I managed a weak smile. "No, just going somewhere I never thought I'd return to." She nodded sympathetically and moved on. If only she knew the half of it. I closed my eyes, remembering the frantic conversation with Carlos as we sped across Lake Texoma in that little motorboat. "We have to go back, Alex," Carlos had said, his voice barely audible over the engine and the lapping waves. "Back to Afghanistan. It's the only way to prove what happened." I'd stared at him in disbelief. "Are you insane? We barely escaped the MPs back there. How the hell are we supposed to get to Afghanistan?" Carlos's eyes had been wild, desperate. "I have contacts, people who owe me favors. We can get there under the radar. But we have to move fast. Once they realize we've escaped, they'll lock down everything." "And then what?" I demanded. "What exactly are we looking for?" "The evidence," Carlos had replied. "The files, the photos, everything we buried is still there, Alex, hidden where we left it. If we can retrieve it, bring it to light, we'd be putting targets on our backs." I'd finished for him. Carlos had nodded grimly. "Bigger ones than we already have. But it's the only way to clear our names, to make things right." The plane hit a patch of turbulence, jolting me back to the present. I glanced around nervously, half expecting to see stern-faced MPs coming down the aisle to arrest me. But it was just a normal flight, full of tourists and business people who had no idea they were sharing a plane with a fugitive. I pulled out the battered notebook, flipping to the page I'd read 100 times since that night. "July 15, 2010, we found something today. Something that was never supposed to exist. The brass is calling it a national security matter. But that's bullshit. What we saw, it's bigger than national security. It's about humanity itself. Alex says we should report it, go through proper channels. But I've seen the look in the colonel's eyes. They're going to bury this, along with anyone who knows about it. We have to hide the evidence, somewhere they'll never think to look. And then, God help us, we have to forget. For our own safety, for everyone's safety. I just hope that someday, when the time is right, we'll find a way to remember, to make this right. The words swam before my eyes, and I felt the familiar wave of nausea that hit every time I read them. What had we seen? What could have been so terrible that we'd willingly erased it from our own memories? The answer lay buried in the Afghan desert, and I was flying straight towards it. Hours later, I stepped off the plane into the sweltering heat of Kabul International Airport. The familiar smells hit me immediately. Dust, spices, vehicle exhaust, bringing with them a flood of memories I'd spent years trying to forget. I made my way through customs with the fake passport Carlos had procured for me, my heart pounding with every step. But the bored-looking official barely glanced at it before waving me through. Outside, I scanned the crowd until I spotted the sign I was looking for. Mr. Johnson, a middle-aged Afghan man, held it, his eyes darting nervously. "I'm Johnson," I said as I approached him. He nodded curtly. "Follow me." We wound our way through the chaotic Kabul traffic in a battered Toyota pickup. My guide, who introduced himself simply as Fahim, was silent for most of the journey, only speaking to point out military checkpoints we needed to avoid. As the city gave way to dusty countryside, I finally broke the silence. "How much did Carlos tell you about why I'm here?" Fahim's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "Enough to know it's dangerous, and that it involves the old American base near Ghazni." I nodded, feeling a chill despite the heat. Ghazni, the name brought flashes of memory, gunfire, explosions, the weight of secrets too heavy to bear. "We'll reach the safe house by nightfall," Fahim continued. "You can rest there. Tomorrow we head to the mountains." The safe house turned out to be little more than a mud brick shack on the outskirts of a small village. As night fell, I sat on a threadbare mattress, studying the map I'd sketched based on the scars on my body and the coordinates in Carlos's journal. A soft knock at the door made me jump. Fahim entered, carrying a tray with some bread, dried fruit, and tea. "Eat," he said, setting the tray down. "You'll need your strength for tomorrow." As I nibbled on the bread, Fahim settled himself on the floor, fixing me with an intense gaze. "Now," he said, "perhaps you can tell me what's so important that you risk coming back to this godforsaken place." I hesitated, weighing how much to reveal, but something in Fahim's eyes, a mix of curiosity and world-weary understanding, made me decide to trust him. "We found something," I said slowly. "My unit back in 2010. Something impossible. Something that changed everything we thought we knew about." "Well, everything." Fahim's eyebrows rose. "And this something, it is still out there?" I nodded. "Sagrun, buried. We made ourselves forget, to protect it, to protect ourselves. But now you must remember," Fahim finished for me. He was silent for a long moment, then said, "There are many secrets buried in these mountains, Mr. Johnson. Not all of them should be unearthed." "I don't have a choice," I replied, my hand unconsciously tracing the scar over my heart. "Whatever we found, it's part of me now. I need to know the truth." Fahim steadied me for another long moment, then nodded. "Very well. We leave at dawn. Try to get some rest." But sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of that final mission. The convoy rolling through the desert, the hidden cave, the blinding light. I jolted awake just as the first rays of sunlight were creeping through the small window. Fahim was already up, checking over an old but well-maintained AK-47. "You know how to use one of these?" he asked, holding out another rifle. I took it, the weight familiar in my hands. "Yeah, I remember." The drive into the mountains was tense, every bump in the road setting my nerves on edge. We passed through several small villages, the residents eyeing our truck with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. The Taliban still control much of this area, Fahim explained as we wound our way up a narrow mountain pass. We must be careful. As we crested a ridge, a vast expanse of desert stretched out before us. And there, in the distance, I saw it, the remnants of the American base, long abandoned but still visible as a scar on the landscape. There, I said, pointing, that's where we need to go. Fahim frowned. It's exposed. Will be visible for miles. We don't have a choice, I replied, already feeling the pull of the place. The answers I sought were there, buried in the sand and rock. We parked the truck in a dry riverbed, concealing it as best we could with brush and camouflage netting. The walk to the base was grueling, the sun beating down mercilessly. As we approached the rusted gates, a wave of déjà vu hit me so hard I stumbled. Fahim caught my arm, steadying me. Are you all right? He asked, concern evident in his voice. I nodded, unable to speak. Memories were flooding back now. Faces of my squad mates, the tension in the air that day, the weight of the secret we'd uncovered pressing down on all of us. We made our way through the abandoned base, our footsteps echoing in the empty buildings. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust and sand, as if the desert was slowly reclaiming what had been taken from it. Finally, we reached a nondescript building near the back of the compound. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This is it, I whispered. This is where we found it. Fahim looked at me, his expression unreadable. Whatever lies beyond that door, Mr. Johnson, are you prepared to face it? I took a deep breath, my hand going to the scar over my heart, the one that matched the coordinates of this very spot. I have to be. With trembling hands, I reached for the door handle. The metal was hot to the touch, baked by years of desert sun. I pulled, expecting resistance, but the door swung open with surprising ease. As dust billowed out from the dark interior, I felt a moment of vertigo, as if I was standing on the edge of a great precipice. Whatever lay inside this room had changed my life once before. Now it was about to change it again. Well, Fahim said softly beside me, shall we see what secrets the desert has kept for you? I nodded, unable to speak. With one last deep breath, I stepped over the threshold, back into the past I tried so hard to forget. The truth, whatever it was, waited in the darkness beyond. The stale air hit me like a physical force as I stepped into the darkness of the abandoned building. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light filtering through cracks in the walls, and the musty smell of decay filled my nostrils. For a moment, I was transported back in time, back to that fateful day when we first stumbled upon this place. Mr. Johnson? Fahim's voice snapped me back to the present. Should I turn on the flashlight? I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. The beam of light cut through the gloom, revealing a room that looked like it had been frozen in time. Overturned chairs, scattered papers, and broken equipment littered the floor, evidence of a hasty evacuation. As I moved further into the room, flashes of memory assaulted me. The frantic voices of my squad mates, the colonel's stern orders, the weight of the secret we'd uncovered pressing down on all of us. What exactly are we looking for? Fahim asked, his eyes darting nervously around the room. I ran my hand along the wall, feeling for something I couldn't quite remember. A hidden compartment, I murmured. We hid something here, something important. My fingers brushed against a slight irregularity in the wall. Heart pounding, I pressed against it, and a section of the wall slid away with a groan of protesting metal. Allah be merciful, Fahim whispered, his eyes wide as the hidden compartment was revealed. Inside was a metal box about the size of a small suitcase. Its surface was corroded by years in the desert air, but the military-grade locks seemed intact. My hands shook as I reached for it, the weight of it familiar and terrifying all at once. "This is it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But is what we came for." As I set the box down on a nearby table, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The room seemed to tilt and spin, and suddenly I wasn't there anymore. I was back in time, reliving that day. "Sergeant Walker, you need to see this." Private Jenkins' voice echoed through the cave, tinged with a mix of excitement and fear. I made my way towards him, ducking under low-hanging stalactites. "What is it, Jenkins?" I asked as I approached, but as soon as I saw it, words failed me. There, half buried in the cave wall, was something that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist. Is that what I think it is?" Corporal Rodriguez whispered beside me. I couldn't answer. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. It was impossible. Changed everything. The sound of footsteps echoed behind us, and I turned to see Colonel Harding enter the chamber. His face went pale as he took in the scene. "My God," he breathed. Then, his expression hardening, "Seal off this area. No one goes in or out without my express permission. And not a word of this to anyone. Do you understand?" "But sir," I started to protest. "Shouldn't we report this? This is bigger than—" "That's an order, Sergeant," Harding snapped. "This is a matter of national security now. Maybe global security. We can't risk this information getting out until we understand what we're dealing with." As the colonel turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in his eyes. Something that sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just about security. This was about power. I looked back at the impossible thing in the cave wall, and in that moment, I knew we had to do something. We had to preserve the truth, even if we couldn't reveal it. "Not yet, Rodriguez," I said quietly. "Get me something to write with, and find me a box. A sturdy one." "What are you thinking, Sarge?" Jenkins asked, his young face etched with concern. I took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling on my shoulders. "We're going to make sure the truth doesn't disappear, even if we have to bury it ourselves." "Mr. Johnson, Alex." Fahim's urgent voice and his hand on my shoulder jolted me back to the present. I blinked, disoriented, to find myself on my knees. The metal box clutched tightly to my chest. "Are you all right?" Fahim asked, his face creased with worry. "You went very pale and then collapsed." I nodded, struggling to my feet. "I'm okay. I just remembered something." Fahim helped me to a chair, his eyes never leaving the box in my hands. "And what is it that you remembered?" I stared at the corroded metal surface, tracing the edges with my fingertips. "We found something," I said slowly. "Something impossible. Something that could change everything." "What do you mean, impossible?" Fahim pressed. I shook my head. "I'm not sure. The memory is still fuzzy. But whatever it was, it scared the hell out of our CO. You wanted to bury it, to pretend we never saw it. But we couldn't let that happen. So we documented everything and hid it here." Fahim's eyes widened. "And now you've come to retrieve it. But why now? After all these years?" I thought about the scars on my body, the map I'd carved into my own skin. Because somehow I knew this day would come. That someday, the truth would need to come out. With trembling hands, I reached for the lock on the box. To my surprise, it opened easily, the mechanism still smooth despite years of disuse. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my ears. Whatever was in this box had changed my life once before. Now it was about to change it again. Taking a deep breath, I lifted the lid. The contents were exactly as I remembered, yet seeing them again hit me like a physical blow. Photos, documents, and a single flash drive lay nestled in protective foam. But it was the item on top that drew my attention. A small, intricately carved stone tablet, covered in symbols I didn't recognize. "What is it?" Fahim asked, leaning in for a closer look. I picked up the tablet, its weight familiar in my hands. This is what we found in the cave. We're part of it, at least. As I turned the tablet over, another memory flashed through my mind: the cave wall, glowing with an otherworldly light, covered in symbols just like these. The writing, I murmured. It's not human, at least not any human language we know of. Fahim's eyes widened. Are you saying? I nodded, the full weight of the truth finally settling on me. Yeah, I think we found evidence of extraterrestrial contact. Ancient contact. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Fahim opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a new sound cut through the silence, the distant whir of helicopter blades. We both froze, listening as the sound grew louder. Fahim rushed to the window, peering out cautiously. "Military helicopters," she reported, his voice tight with tension. "At least 2, maybe more, coming this way." My mind raced. How had they found us so quickly? Had we tripped some kind of silent alarm when we opened the hidden compartment? "We need to go," I said, quickly repacking the box. "Now." Fahim nodded, already moving towards the door. "There's a series of caves in the hills to the east. If we can reach them, we might be able to lose any ground pursuit." I hefted the box, its weight both physical and metaphorical. "Lead the way." As we stepped out of the building, the sound of the helicopters was deafening. I could see them now, black shapes against the bright desert sky, bearing down on us with terrifying speed. "Run!" Fahim shouted, and we took off across the compound. The first bullets kicked up dust at our feet just as we reached the perimeter fence. Fahim boosted me over, then scrambled after me as the air filled with the sound of gunfire. We sprinted across the open desert, the box bouncing painfully against my side with every step. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like lead, but terror and adrenaline kept me moving. Just as I thought my body would give out, I saw the caves Fahim had mentioned looming ahead. With a final burst of speed, we dove into the nearest opening, the cold darkness enveloping us as the sound of the helicopters echoed off the rock walls. We pressed ourselves against the cave wall, gasping for breath. Outside, I could hear voices shouting, the thud of boots on sand. "What now?" I whispered to Fahim. He peered cautiously out of the cave entrance. "We go deeper," he said. "These caves form a complex network. If we can navigate them, we might be able to lose our pursuers and find another way out." I nodded, clutching the box to my chest. We'd come too far to be caught now. The truth hidden in this box had cost me years of my life, my peace of mind, and now potentially my freedom. But it was too important to let it fall back into the hands of those who would bury it. As we moved deeper into the cave system, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the precipice of something monumental. Whatever we'd uncovered all those years ago, it had the power to change the world. And now, for better or worse, that power was in our hands. "Come on," I said to Fahim, my resolve strengthening. "We've got a long way to go." With one last look back towards the cave entrance, we plunged into the darkness, carrying with us a truth too big for the world to ignore. The darkness of the cave was absolute, broken only by the thin beam of Fahim's flashlight. We had been moving for hours, the twisting passages seeming to lead us deeper into the heart of the mountain. The distant sounds of pursuit had long since faded, replaced by the eerie silence of the underground and the echo of our labored breathing. "We should rest," Fahim said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's a small chamber up ahead." I nodded, too exhausted to speak. The metal box containing our precious cargo felt like it weighed a ton, the straps digging into my shoulders. The chamber Fahim led us to was little more than a widening in the passage, but it offered enough space for us to sit and catch our breath. As we settled onto the coal stone floor, I finally allowed myself to open the box again. "We need to know what we're dealing with," I said, my voice hoarse from the dry air. "If we're going to risk our lives for this, we need to understand what it is." Fahim nodded, shining the flashlight on the contents of the box. I carefully lifted out the stone tablet, its surface cold and oddly smooth under my fingers. The alien symbols seemed to shimmer in the dim light, almost as if they were alive. "Can you read any of it?" Fahim asked, leaning in for a closer look. I shook my head. "No, but..." I trailed off as another memory surfaced. Wait, there was someone, a linguist, Dr. Emily Chun. She was working on deciphering the symbols. With trembling hands, I reached for the stack of documents in the box. Sure enough, there was a folder labeled Chun-E, Preliminary Analysis. I opened it, and a flood of technical jargon and complex diagrams spilled out. "This is it," I breathed. Dr. Chen's initial findings. As I scanned the documents, the full weight of what we had discovered began to settle on me. According to Dr. Chen's notes, the symbols represented a language unlike any known to human linguistics. It appeared to be a message left behind by a civilization far more advanced than our own. "What does it say?" Fahim asked, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. It's a warning, and an invitation." "What do you mean?" I looked up at Fahim, the enormity of the situation making my head spin. "According to this, an alien civilization made contact with humans thousands of years ago. They saw potential in us, but also great danger. The message warns of a cosmic trial of sorts, a test that humanity would face when we reached a certain level of technological advancement." Fahim's brow furrowed. "A test? What kind of test?" I scanned further down the document. "It's not entirely clear, but it seems to involve a choice, a decision that will determine whether humanity is ready to join a larger galactic community. Or..." I trailed off, the implications too terrifying to voice. "They're what?" Fahim pressed. I met his gaze, my voice barely above a whisper. "Or be deemed too dangerous to allow to progress further." The silence that followed was deafening. Fahim stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief. This cannot be real. It's impossible." "I know how it sounds," I said, "but I remember now. When we found that cave, when we saw the full message carved into the wall, we knew it was real. Somehow we just knew." I rifled through the rest of the documents, finding photos that confirmed my memories. The cave wall, glowing with an otherworldly light, covered in the same symbols as the tablet, and in the center a device of some kind, clearly not of human origin. "This is why they wanted to bury it," I said, the pieces finally falling into place. "The government, the military, they weren't ready for the world to know. They weren't ready for the test." Fahim shook his head, struggling to process the information. "But why now? Why did you choose to remember now?" I thought about the scars on my body, the map I'd carved into my own skin. "Because the time is coming. The test. It's approaching, and humanity needs to be prepared." As if in response to my words, a low rumble shook the cave. Dust and small stones rained down from the ceiling. "What was that?" Fahim asked, alarm clear in his voice. Before I could respond, another tremor hit, stronger this time. The flashlight beam danced wildly as Fahim struggled to keep his footing. "We need to move," I said, hastily repacking the box. "Now." We scrambled to our feet just as a third tremor rocked the cave. This one was accompanied by a sound I recognized all too well, the muffled boom of explosions. "They're blasting their way in," I shouted over the noise. "We have to find another way out." We ran through the twisting passages, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind us. The beam of Fahim's flashlight bounced wildly, creating a disorienting strobe effect. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like lead, but terror and the need to protect our discovery drove me forward. Suddenly, Fahim skidded to a stop. "Knock!" he cried, pointing ahead. A faint glow illuminated the passage ahead. For a moment, I feared we had run straight into our pursuers, but as we approached, I realized the light was coming from above. "An opening," Fahim said, hope clear in his voice. "If we can reach it." Another explosion rocked the cave closer this time. We could hear voices now, echoing through the passages. "Give me a boost," I said, handing the precious box to Fahim. With his help, I managed to reach the opening. It was tight, but I could see sky beyond. Freedom was tantalizingly close. "Come on," I said, reaching down to help Fahim. But as he stretched up to hand me the box, a shout echoed through the cave. "There they are." Fahim's eyes met mine, and in that moment, I saw the decision form in them. "Dal," he said, pressing the box into my hands. "I'll hold them off." "Lo," they cried. "I won't leave you." Fahim smiled sadly. "You must. This truth, it's bigger than either of us. The world needs to know." Before I could protest further, he shoved me up through the opening. "Go!" he shouted. "Run!" Tears blurring my vision, I scrambled out onto the mountainside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. In any other circumstance, it would have been beautiful. The sound of gunfire erupted from the cave below, spurring me into action. With the box clutched tightly to my chest, I ran. Each step took me further from Fahim, from the sacrifice he had made. But it also took me closer to the truth that could change everything. As I crested a ridge, I allowed myself one look back. The cave entrance was swarming with military personnel now. There was no sign of Fahim. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I knew he couldn't hear me. "I'll make sure it wasn't in vain." With a heavy heart but a renewed sense of purpose, I turned and continued my flight. The truth I carried was a burden, but also a responsibility. Humanity's future might well depend on what I did next. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, I made a silent vow. I would find a way to share this knowledge with the world. I would prepare humanity for the test that was coming. And somehow, someway, I would make sure Fahim's sacrifice was honored. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger. But for the first time since I'd started this journey, I felt a glimmer of hope. We weren't alone in the universe. And if we could pass this cosmic test, a future beyond our wildest dreams might be waiting for us among the stars. With that thought driving me forward, I disappeared into the gathering darkness, carrying with me a truth that could change the course of human history. The cheap motel room felt like a prison cell. I paced back and forth, my footsteps muffled by the threadbare carpet, as the weight of my decision pressed down on me like a physical force. The metal box sat on the bed, its contents a Pandora's box of world-changing information. 3 days had passed since my narrow escape from the mountains. 3 days of constant movement, paranoid glances over my shoulder, and sleepless nights filled with nightmares of alien judgments and Fahim's sacrifice. I collapsed into the room's single chair, running my hands through my unwashed hair. The face that stared back at me from the cracked mirror was barely recognizable, gaunt, with a week's worth of beard and eyes haunted by the burden of forbidden knowledge. "What the hell am I supposed to do now?" I muttered to my haggard reflection. As if in answer, my burner phone buzzed. I snatched it up, my heart racing. Only one person had this number. "Alex, are you there?" Sarah's voice was tight with worry. "I'm here," I replied, relief washing over me at the sound of my sister's voice. "Thank God," Sarah breathed. "Are you okay? Where are you?" I hesitated. How much could I safely tell her? I'm safe for now, but I can't tell you where I am. It's not safe. Alex, what's going on? The news is saying you're wanted for treason. There are reports of a shootout in Afghanistan. Please, just talk to me. I closed my eyes, fighting back the urge to spill everything. Sarah had always been my rock, the one person I could count on no matter what. But involving her in this, it could put her in danger. "Sarah, I trailed off, unsure how to continue. "Whatever it is, we can figure it out together," Sarah said, her voice softening. "You know you can trust me." In that moment, the dam broke. Words poured out of me. The discovery in Afghanistan years ago. The buried memories. The map carved into my skin. The harrowing journey back to the desert. And the earth-shattering truth contained in the metal box. When I finally fell silent, the line was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Sarah?" I asked tentatively. "I'm here," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, it's incredible and terrifying. What are you going to do?" I stood up, moving to the window and peering out through a gap in the curtains. The parking lot was empty save for my nondescript rental car, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "I don't know," I admitted. "This information, it could change everything. But if I go public with it, I'll be branded a traitor. And that's if they don't just disappear me first." "But the world needs to know," Sarah insisted. "If what you're saying is true, if humanity is facing some kind of cosmic test." "I know," I said, cutting her off. "But it's not that simple. Think about it, Sarah. How would the world react to learning we're not alone in the universe? That an advanced alien civilization has been watching us, judging us? It could cause panic, chaos. Or it could unite us," Sarah countered. "Give us a common purpose." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. Maybe. Or maybe it would just accelerate our path to self-destruction. We'd be failing the test before it even began. Raise cosmic implications. She'll know what it means. "Cosmic implications," Sarah repeated. "Got it. And then what?" I took a deep breath, the weight of what I was about to do settling on my shoulders. "Then we set up a meeting, somewhere public, but where we can talk privately. I'll bring the evidence, and we'll let Maya decide how to proceed." "Alex," Sarah's voice was hesitant. "Are you sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back." I looked at the metal box on the bed, thinking of the alien tablet inside, of the message carved into that cave wall years ago. I thought of Fahim's sacrifice, of the cosmic test looming in humanity's future. "I'm sure," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "The world deserves to know the truth, whatever the consequences." "Okay," Sarah said. "I'll contact Maya. Where and when do you want to meet?" I thought for a moment. "The National Air and Space Museum. 3 days from now. It seems fitting." Sarah chuckled softly. "A museum dedicated to humanity's achievements in space. Yeah, I'd say that's fitting. Be careful, Alex. I'll see you in 3 days." As I ended the call, a mix of emotions washed over me. Fear, certainly, fear of what might happen once we released this information to the world. But also a sense of purpose, of rightness. This was why I had carved that map into my skin, why I had held on to the truth even when I couldn't remember it. I walked over to the bed and opened the metal box one more time. The alien tablet seemed to pulse with an inner light, the strange symbols both beautiful and terrifying. I ran my fingers over its surface, marveling at the smooth texture that had somehow withstood thousands of years. "Soon," I murmured to the tablet, "soon the whole world will know about you." As I carefully repacked the box, My mind raced with the preparations I needed to make. 3 days wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. I needed to gather all the evidence, prepare a coherent narrative, and figure out how to present this world-changing information in a way that wouldn't cause global panic. But even as I planned, a nagging doubt gnawed at the back of my mind. Was I doing the right thing? Or was I about to open a Pandora's box that could never be closed? I shook my head, pushing the doubts aside. The decision had been made. In 3 days, the truth would come out, and for better or worse, the world would never be the same. With a renewed sense of purpose, I began to pack my meager belongings. It was time to head to Washington, D.C., to face whatever fate awaited me there. As I zipped up my bag, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror once more. The face that looked back at me was still haggard, still marked by the ordeal of the past weeks. But there was something new in the eyes now, a determination, a fire. I was no longer running from the truth. I was running towards it, ready to face whatever consequences came with it. "Let's do this," I said to my reflection, hefting the metal box. As I stepped out of the motel room into the cold night air, I felt like I was standing on the precipice of a new world. In 3 days, everything would change, and I would be the one to set that change in motion. The weight of that responsibility was enormous. But as I drove off into the night, heading towards Washington and whatever future awaited me there, I felt ready to bear it. The truth had chosen me as its messenger, and I would not let it down. The fluorescent lights of the airport terminal buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the sea of tired faces around me. I sat rigidly in the uncomfortable plastic chair, my body tense, eyes constantly scanning the crowd. The metal box containing humanity's future sat between my feet, never leaving my sight. Flight 1876 to Washington, D.C. is now boarding at Gate 12. The monotone voice announced over the PA system. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. This was it, the point of no return. As I stood to join the line of passengers, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A man in a dark suit, trying too hard to look casual, his hand hovering near his hip in a way that screamed concealed weapon. My heart rate spiked. They'd found me. I forced myself to move calmly, joining the queue without looking back. My mind raced. Had they identified me? Were they waiting to make their move? Or just surveilling me for now? "Sir? Your boarding pass, please." I startled, realizing I'd reached the front of the line. The gate agent was looking at me expectantly, her practiced smile faltering slightly at my obvious tension. "Sorry," I mumbled, fumbling for the document. As I handed it over, I noticed my hands were shaking. "Get it together, Alex," I chided myself. The agent scanned the pass, then frowned at her screen. "I'm sorry, sir, but there seems to be an issue with your ticket. If you could step aside for a moment." My blood ran cold. This was it. They were going to detain me right here at the gate. But as the agent turned to call her supervisor, I made a split-second decision. Clutching the metal box to my chest, I bolted. "Pain! Stop!" Voices shouted behind me, but I didn't look back. I weaved through the crowded terminal, heart pounding in my ears. Where to go? The exits would be watched. I needed another way out. As I rounded a corner, I saw it, the employees' only door to the tarmac. Without hesitation, I slammed into it, bursting out into the night air. Alarms blared as I sprinted across the tarmac, the roar of jet engines nearly drowning out the shouts behind me. I could see a chain-link fence ahead, beyond it, freedom. But as I approached the fence, headlights suddenly illuminated the area. A voice boomed through a megaphone. "Freeze! This is airport security. Put your hands in the air." I skidded to a stop, my mind whirling. There had to be a way out. There had to be. "Alex!" The familiar voice cut through my panic. I turned to see a battered pickup truck idling nearby, Sarah at the wheel. "Jet in," she shouted. I didn't hesitate. I dove into the passenger seat as Sarah floored it, the truck's tires squealing as we peeled away from the fence. "Sarah? What the hell?" I gasped, clutching the metal box as we bounced over uneven ground. "You're welcome," she said, her eyes fixed on the impromptu road ahead. "I had a feeling you might need an extraction plan." As we burst through a service gate onto a public road, I finally allowed myself to breathe. "How did you know?" Sarah shot me a sideways glance. "Maya's contact at the FBI tipped her off. They know Alex. They know you're trying to go public." I slumped in my seat, the adrenaline crash hitting me hard. "So what now?" "Now," Sarah said, merging onto the highway. "We drive. DC's about 15 hours from here. We'll take turns, avoid main roads where we can. With any luck, we'll make it to the meeting with Maya before they can regroup." As the reality of our situation sank in, a wave of guilt washed over me. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never meant to drag you into this. If they catch us..." "Tang!" She cut me off, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "I'm exactly where I want to be. We're in this together, remember?" I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. What had I done to deserve a sister like Sarah? As the miles rolled by, we fell into a tense silence, both lost in our own thoughts. The weight of our mission pressed down on me, heavier with each passing mile. Sometime around 3 a.m., as we were passing through the rolling hills of West Virginia, Sarah finally broke the silence. "So, are you going to tell me what's in the box?" I glanced down at the metal container, still clutched tightly in my lap. "It's complicated," Sarah snorted. "Yeah, I gathered that much when we had to make a dramatic airport escape. Come on, Alex. If we're risking our lives for this, don't you think I deserve to know why?" She was right, of course. Taking a deep breath, I began to explain about the alien tablet, the warning carved into the cave wall, the impending test that would determine humanity's fate. As I spoke, I watched Sarah's expression in the dim light of the dashboard. Her eyes widened, her knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, but she didn't interrupt. When I finally fell silent, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, she said, "Holy shit." I couldn't help but laugh, a short, slightly hysterical sound. "Yeah, that about sums it up. So let me get this straight," Sarah said, her voice carefully controlled. "There's an advanced alien civilization out there. They've been watching us for thousands of years, and now they're going to... what? Judge us? Decide if we're worthy of joining their space club." Put like that, it sounded absurd, but I nodded. "Essentially, yes." Sarah blew out a long breath. "And the government, our government, knows about this and decided to keep it secret? They're afraid," I explained. "Afraid of how people will react, afraid of losing control. The keeping this secret, it's not right. Humanity deserves to know what's coming, to have a chance to prepare." "But how do we prepare for something like this?" Sarah asked, voicing the question that had been haunting me for days. "How do we pass a test when we don't even know what's being tested?" I stared out at the dark highway stretching before us, considering her words. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I have to believe that knowledge is better than ignorance. That if we face this together as a species, we stand a better chance than if a select few try to control the outcome." Sarah nodded slowly. "I can see why you're willing to risk everything for this. It's bigger than any of us." As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, we pulled into a rest stop. Sarah killed the engine, turning to face me fully for the first time in hours. "Alex," she said, her voice serious, "are you absolutely sure about this? Once we meet with Maya, once this information gets out, there's no going back. The world will never be the same." I looked down at the metal box in my lap, thinking of Fahim's sacrifice, of the years I'd spent with this truth buried in my subconscious. Then I met Sarah's gaze. "Unsure," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Whatever happens next, the truth needs to come out. Humanity deserves a chance to face this challenge head-on." Sarah studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, then, let's change the world." As we switched places, Sarah settling into the passenger seat for some much-needed rest, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. In a matter of hours, we would be in Washington, D.C. We would meet with Maya, share our incredible story, and set in motion events that would alter the course of human history. The sun was rising as I pulled back onto the highway, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold. It felt symbolic somehow, the dawn of a new era for humanity. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever cosmic test we were about to face, at least we would face it with open eyes. The truth, long buried, was finally coming to light. As I drove towards our destiny in D.C., I couldn't help but wonder, when the dust settled, when humanity learned of its place in a larger cosmic community, would we rise to the challenge? Or would we falter, proving the alien observers right in their caution? The answer to that question lay somewhere in the miles ahead, in the meeting that awaited us, in the reaction of a world about to have its fundamental understanding of reality shaken to the core. One thing was certain. After today, nothing would ever be the same again. The National Air and Space Museum loomed before us, its modernist architecture a stark contrast to the classical buildings surrounding it. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the irony of our meeting place, a testament to humanity's limited ventures into space, about to become the birthplace of a revelation that would redefine our place in the cosmos. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with tension. I clutched the metal box containing our world-changing evidence, my knuckles white. "As ready as I'll ever be." We made our way up the steps, trying to look like ordinary tourists despite our racing hearts and the weight of our secret. The morning crowd was already forming, families and school groups chattering excitedly about the exhibits within. "There," Sarah whispered, nodding towards a woman standing near the entrance. "That's Maya." Maya Rodriguez cut an impressive figure, tall, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She was dressed casually, but something in her posture screamed, journalist on the hunt for a story. As we approached, Maya's eyes locked onto the metal box in my arms. Her expression remained neutral, but I could see the spark of curiosity ignite in her gaze. "Mr. Walker," she said quietly, extending her hand, "I'm glad you made it. Your sister told me you had some trouble on the way." I shook her hand, noting the firm grit. "Nothing we couldn't handle. Thank you for meeting us." Maya nodded. "All business. Let's take this somewhere more private, shall we? I've arranged for us to use one of the conference rooms." She led us through the museum, past exhibits of lunar landers and space shuttles that suddenly seemed quaint in light of what we knew. We attracted a few curious glances, Maya's press credentials and purposeful stride ensuring we weren't stopped. The conference room was small but secure, with no windows and a heavy door that Maya locked behind us. As we settled into chairs around the table, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was it, the point of no return. Maya pulled out a digital recorder and a notepad. "Before we begin, I want to be clear about something. I'm here to listen, but I make no promises about publication. Whatever you show me, whatever you tell me, it needs to be verifiable. I won't risk my reputation or the posts on a story I can't back up." "Understood." I nodded, appreciating her directness. "Understood. And believe me, what we're about to show you, it's real. Almost too real." With that, I placed the metal box on the table and opened it. Maya leaned forward, her professional demeanor cracking slightly as she saw the contents. "Is that?" she breathed, reaching out to touch the alien tablet. "Yes." I said, carefully lifting it out. An artifact of non-human origin, discovered in Afghanistan in 2010. For the next hour, Sarah and I laid out the entire story, the initial discovery, the government cover-up, my buried memories, and the harrowing journey to recover the evidence. We showed Maya the photos, the documents, Dr. Chen's preliminary analysis of the alien language. Throughout our explanation, Maya remained silent, her pen flying across her notepad, occasionally pausing to ask for clarification or more detail. Her expression was a mix of disbelief and growing excitement, the look of a journalist who knows she's onto the story of a lifetime. When we finally fell silent, Maya sat back in her chair, letting out a long breath. "This is incredible. If it's true, and that's still a big if, it would change everything. Our understanding of history, of our place in the universe." "The cosmic trial," Sarah interjected. "Don't forget about that. Humanity is facing a test, Maya. One we didn't even know was coming." Maya nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. "That's the part that concerns me most. If we publish this, the panic it could cause. People deserve to know the truth," I insisted, leaning forward. "Yes, it might cause some panic initially, but it could also unite us, give us a common purpose. We need to face this challenge together, as a species." Maya studied me for a long moment, her sharp eyes seeming to peer into my soul. "You really believe that, don't you? That the truth is worth the risk?" I nodded, holding her gaze. "Inda, I've risked everything to bring this to light. People have died to keep this secret, but keeping humanity in the dark, it's not right. We deserve a chance to prove ourselves worthy." Maya was quiet for a moment, then nodded decisively. "Alright, I'm in, but we need to do this right. I'll need to verify as much of this as possible, speak to experts who can authenticate the artifact and the documents. And we'll need a plan for how to present this to the public in a way that minimizes panic." Relief washed over me. She believed us. We had a chance. But before I could respond, a commotion outside the door caught our attention. Raised voices, the sound of running feet. "Oh no," Sarah whispered, her face pale. "They've found us." Maya was on her feet in an instant, shoving her notes and the digital recorder into her bag. "Is there another way out of here?" I shook my head, already moving to repack the metal box. "I don't think so. We're trapped." Just then, the door burst open. A team of men in dark suits poured in, guns drawn. "Freeze. Hands where we can see them." My heart sank. We were so close to getting the truth out. As we raised our hands, I locked eyes with Maya. She gave me an almost imperceptible nod, and I realized she had managed to slip the alien tablet into her bag along with her notes. A familiar figure stepped into the room, Colonel Harding. Older now, but still carrying himself with the same authoritative presence I remembered from Afghanistan. "Alex Walker," he said, his voice a mix of disappointment and resignation. "You should have left well enough alone. You can't bury the truth forever, Colonel," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "The world deserves to know what's coming." Harding's eyes narrowed. "And cause a global panic? Destroy the very fabric of society? Lo, Welker. Some truths are too dangerous." As the men began to handcuff us, I saw Maya being pulled aside, protesting loudly about freedom of the press. But her eyes met mine one last time, and I saw the determination there. She would find a way. The truth would come out. As we were led out of the museum, past gawking tourists and confused security guards, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. We might have been caught, but we had planted the seed. The story was in Maya's hands now. "What happens now?" Sarah asked quietly as we were loaded into a black SUV with tinted windows. I looked at her, then at the Washington Monument looming in the distance, a symbol of the nation we thought we knew. now forever changed by the truth we carried. Now, I said, we wait, and we hope that humanity is ready for what comes next. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, carrying us to an uncertain fate, I couldn't help but think of the alien message, the cosmic trial that awaited us all. We had done our part. We had brought the truth to light. Now it was up to humanity to prove itself worthy of the stars. The SUV merged into traffic, disappearing into the heart of Washington, D.C. Behind us, in a museum dedicated to humanity's first tentative steps into space, a journalist clutched a bag containing proof that we were not alone in the universe. The truth was out there now, and nothing would ever be the same again. The world exploded into chaos on a Tuesday. I sat in my stark, windowless cell, watching on a small TV belted to the wall as Maya Rodriguez broke the story that would change humanity forever. Her face was composed, professional, but I could see the excitement burning in her eyes as she addressed the camera. Good evening. This is Maya Rodriguez with a Washington Post special report. Tonight, we bring you a story that will reshape our understanding of human history and our place in the universe. As Maya began to lay out the evidence, the alien artifact, the warning of a cosmic trial, the years of government cover-up, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. The truth was finally out, but at what cost? The door to my cell opened with a metallic clang. Colonel Harding stood there, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "Are you happy now, Walker?" he spat. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stood slowly, meeting his gaze. "I've given humanity a chance, Colonel. A chance to face this challenge together, instead of letting a select few decide our fate." Harding laughed bitterly. "A chance? You've thrown the world into chaos. Nuck." He gestured at the TV, where footage of protests and riots was now playing. In New York, thousands gathered in Times Square, their faces a mix of fear and awe as they stared up at the massive screens displaying images of the alien artifact. In London, crowds surrounded Parliament, demanding answers. In Beijing, riot police clashed with protesters outside government buildings. "This is just the beginning," Harding said, his voice low and dangerous. Religious fanatics claiming it's the end times, conspiracy theorists having a field day, governments pointing fingers, accusing each other of hiding more secrets. "You've lit a fuse on a powder keg, Walker." I watched the scenes of global turmoil, my heart heavy. It had to be done, Colonel. Keeping this secret, it wasn't protecting humanity. It was denying us the chance to prepare, to unite. Harding shook his head, disgust clear on his face. "Unite? Look at them. They're tearing each other apart." Before I could respond, another figure appeared in the doorway. A woman in a crisp suit that screamed, "Government official." "Colonel Harding," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "The president has called an emergency meeting. Your presence is required." Harding nodded, shooting me one last glare before following the woman out. The cell door slammed shut behind them, leaving me alone with the images of a world in upheaval. Hours passed, the TV my only window to the outside world. I watched as world leaders made hasty statements. Scientists debated the implications of the alien message, and religious leaders grappled with the theological ramifications of extraterrestrial life. Then something changed. A new story began to emerge, spreading across social media and picked up by news outlets around the globe. People were reporting strange phenomena, lights in the sky, unexplained symbols appearing on electronic devices, a low hum that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. My blood ran cold as I realized what was happening. The cosmic trial had begun. The cell door opened again, this time revealing Sarah. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "Alex," she said, rushing to embrace me. "It's happening. They're here." Before I could respond, Colonel Harding appeared behind her. His earlier anger seemed to have been replaced by grim resignation. "Walker," he said, his voice gruff. "We need you." Confused, I let them lead me out of the cell and through a maze of corridors. We emerged in what looked like a high-tech command center, filled with screens displaying news feeds and data streams from around the world. The woman in the suit from earlier approached us. "Mr. Walker, I'm Director Evelyn Shun of the newly formed Extraterrestrial Contact Division. We're facing an unprecedented situation, and, well, you're our foremost expert on this alien message." I blinked, struggling to process this sudden shift. I don't understand. You were ready to lock me away for treason, and now you want my help." Director Chen's expression was grim. "The situation has changed. We're picking up signals from all over the globe, energy readings unlike anything we've ever seen. And there's this." She led me to a central screen which showed a 3D model of the Earth. Surrounding the planet was a complex network of glowing lines and symbols, eerily similar to the markings on the alien artifact. "It appeared an hour ago," Chen explained. "Every satellite, every deep space telescope, they're all seeing it. Is like we're in some kind of cosmic petri dish." The implications hit me like a physical blow. This was it. The test had begun, and the entire planet was the testing ground. "What do they want?" Harding demanded. "What kind of test is this?" All eyes in the room turned to me. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. I'm not sure. The message wasn't specific about the nature of the trial, but I think they're waiting for us to make the next move. "Us?" Chen asked. "You mean all of us?" I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. "This isn't a test of our technology or our military might. It's a test of our species as a whole. How we react, how we come together or don't in the face of this revelation." A tense silence fell over the room as the weight of my words sank in. Then, a voice crackled over the intercom. "Director Chan, we're receiving a transmission. It's being broadcast globally, on all frequencies." Chun nodded to a technician, and suddenly every screen in the room was filled with the same image. A swirling pattern of light and color that somehow felt alive, intelligent. A voice filled the room, unlike anything I had ever heard. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. Simply was, "People of Earth," the voice said, each word resonating with otherworldly power. "The time of judgment is upon you. Your trial begins now. Unite or perish. The choice is yours." As suddenly as it had appeared, the transmission cut off, leaving the room in stunned silence. Director Chen was the first to recover. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice shaky but determined, "it seems your expertise is more vital than ever. Will you help us navigate this cosmic trial?" I looked around the room, at the faces filled with fear and hope, then back at the screen showing our planet encased in alien symbols. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming, but I knew there was only one answer I could give. "Yes," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I'll help, but not just you, all of humanity. If we're going to pass this test, we need to do it together. No more secrets, no more hidden agendas. It's time for complete transparency." Harding looked like he wanted to object, but Chun cut him off with a sharp nod. "Agreed. We'll set up a global broadcast. The world needs to know what we're facing, and they need to hear it from you." As the room erupted into a flurry of activity, Sarah squeezed my hand. "Are you ready for this?" she asked softly. I took a deep breath, thinking of the long journey that had led to this moment, the buried memories, the scars on my body, the friends lost along the way. It all came down to this. "Ready or not," I said, "it's time to face our cosmic reckoning." As I was led towards a hastily assembled broadcast studio, I couldn't help but think of Fahim, of Carlos, of all those who had sacrificed to bring this truth to light. I silently vowed to honor their memory by doing everything in my power to help humanity pass this ultimate test. The future of our species now hung in the balance, and I was about to address billions of scared, confused people, trying to unite them in the face of an unimaginable challenge. No pressure, right? The red light on the camera blinked on, and I took a deep breath. "People of Earth," I began, echoing the alien voice. "My name is Alex Walker, and I'm here to tell you about the most important test humanity has ever faced." As I spoke, laying out everything I knew about the cosmic trial, I could almost feel the weight of billions of eyes upon me. In homes, in public squares, in refugee camps and palaces alike, humanity held its breath, united for perhaps the first time in history by a common purpose: to prove ourselves worthy of the stars. The trial had begun, and the fate of our species now rested in our own hands.